Good evening, and if you are just tuning in, I want you to stay with us because what we are about to tell you is going to sound impossible, and I need you to understand from the outset that we have verified every word of it through three separate channels before coming to you with it. My name is David Hale. Beside me is Sarah Donovan. It is a little after 4 in the morning on the East Coast, and roughly 90 minutes ago, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention issued what is called a Level 1 Health Alert Network Advisory, the highest category in their system. And they issued it simultaneously to all 50 states, which is something that has happened exactly twice in the last 40 years. The advisory concerns a mutated strain of the rabies virus. I want to be very precise about the language they used, because the language is the story. The advisory describes, and I am quoting directly, confirmed human-to-human transmission of a lyssavirus variant through respiratory droplet and possible aerosol routes, absent any percutaneous exposure. In plain speech, that means rabies is spreading through the air, and the people getting it have not been bitten by anything.
David, I have been sitting here for the last hour reading the same sentence over and over, and I want to be honest with our audience about something, because I think honesty is the only currency we have tonight. When our news director woke me up and told me what we were covering, I said the words, "That is not possible," out loud in my own kitchen to nobody. Rabies is the thing you learn about as a child. You learn not to touch the raccoon in the daylight. You learn that if a bat gets in the house, you go to the emergency room. It is the oldest fear we have, and it has always come with a rule attached, and the rule was that it needed teeth, it needed a break in the skin. That rule is what let all of us sleep. And in the last few hours, doctors in at least 6 American cities have been standing in front of patients who never touched an animal, who have no wound anywhere on their bodies, and those doctors have been looking at symptoms they recognize immediately and cannot explain.
Let me build the timeline because the timeline matters enormously for understanding where this is going. The first documented case that anybody has retroactively connected to this cluster was a warehouse worker in Springfield, Missouri, admitted 11 days ago with what was recorded as anxiety and difficulty swallowing. That patient died 6 days later, and the case was closed as encephalitis of unknown origin. No autopsy was performed initially. 3 days after that death, Mercy Hospital in Springfield admitted 4 more patients from the same warehouse and 2 family members who had never set foot in the building. That is the moment the pattern broke open, because family members do not share an animal exposure with warehouse workers. The Missouri Department of Health sent samples to the CDC's rabies laboratory in Atlanta. Those samples came back positive for a lyssavirus, but not one that matched any known variant in the reference library. They gave it a designation. The designation is lyssavirus rabies variant 17, and the working shorthand that clinicians are already using is RV17.
And while David walks you through the science of how this was found, I want you to hold on to who found it, because a person found it. A single hospital pathologist in Springfield, Missouri, looked at a case that had already been closed and filed and forgotten, and decided it did not sit right. That pathologist reopened it, requested tissue that had almost been discarded, filled out the paperwork to send samples 800 miles to Atlanta on the basis of nothing more than a feeling that something was wrong. We do not have that person's name yet, and we may never get it, because I suspect that person is not thinking about interviews right now. But every single hour of warning that this country has tonight, every hour, exists because one tired human being in a basement laboratory in Missouri refused to let a strange death go unexplained. I want that on the record at the top of this broadcast.
The current confirmed numbers, as of the CDC advisory 90 minutes ago: 41 laboratory confirmed cases of RV17 across the United States, 19 deaths, 260 presumptive cases under investigation, meaning patients presenting with the clinical picture but not yet sequenced. The geographic spread is what alarms epidemiologists most. Springfield, Missouri is the presumed origin, with 22 confirmed, but there are confirmed cases in Kansas City, in St. Louis, in Chicago, in Dallas, in Memphis, and, as of about 40 minutes ago, 3 in Denver. Now, the reason that pattern matters is that it maps almost exactly onto the interstate trucking network out of central Missouri. Springfield sits at the junction of Interstate 44 and Highway 65. The warehouse in question is a regional distribution hub. Between 200 and 300 trucks a day leave that facility, and they leave for every state in the continental United States. That is the vector, not animals, freight.
We are getting messages already. Our inbox has more than 900 in it, which for 4 in the morning tells you how many people are awake and afraid. This one is from a viewer named Marguerite in Joplin, Missouri, about 70 miles from Springfield. Marguerite writes, "My husband drives for the company you are talking about. He got home Tuesday. He has been in the bedroom since yesterday afternoon with the lights off, saying the fan is too loud and there is no fan. I asked him if he wanted water and he started crying. He never cries. I do not know what to do. The urgent care line has been busy for 4 hours. Marguerite, I am going to tell you what the CDC guidance says, and I am going to be truthful with you about what it does not say. Call 911, tell them explicitly that you suspect RV-17 exposure, and do not enter that room without covering your face. Stay on with dispatch until they answer. Do not wait for the urgent care line, and Marguerite, I am so sorry."
I want to explain the clinical picture because recognizing it may be the single most useful thing this broadcast does tonight, and I am going to do it carefully. Classical rabies has an incubation period measured in weeks to months, typically 1 to 3 months from bite to symptom. That long incubation is why the post-exposure vaccine works at all. You have time. RV-17 does not appear to behave that way. Based on the Springfield cluster, where exposure windows can be reconstructed with some precision because of shift records, the incubation period appears to be between 4 and 9 days. Some of the family member cases suggest it may be as short as 72 hours. That is a catastrophic difference. It means the virus is moving faster than our ability to trace it, and it means that by the time a person shows symptoms, everyone that person breathed near for the previous week is already exposed.
The symptoms themselves, and David, forgive me, I want to say these in ordinary words rather than clinical ones, because at this hour there are people watching who are looking across a room at somebody they love and trying to decide if they are imagining things. It starts with what looks like flu or looks like a bad night of sleep, low fever, headache, a scratchy throat, then something changes, and the people who have seen it describe the change as unmistakable, sensitivity to sound and light that goes past discomfort into pain, a refusal of water, not because the person is not thirsty, but because the sight of it causes the throat to spasm, agitation, confusion that comes in waves, so the person is themselves and then is not, and then is themselves again, and the worst reports are from families who say the lucid moments are the hardest because the person knows.
To Sarah's point, the medical term is hydrophobia, and it is one of the most specific signs in all of clinical medicine. There is no other common condition that produces it. If you are watching this and someone in your household is refusing water while visibly dehydrated, that is not anxiety and it is not the flu. That is a medical emergency and you should treat it as one. Now, the other component of the CDC advisory concerns treatment, and I have to be direct with you here because false hope costs lives in an outbreak. Rabies post-exposure prophylaxis, the vaccine plus immunoglobulin regimen, is close to 100% effective if administered before symptoms appear. After symptoms appear, classical rabies has a case fatality rate above 99%. There are fewer than 20 documented survivors in recorded medical history. The CDC advisory states that RV-17 appears to respond to existing post-exposure prophylaxis in preliminary testing. That is genuinely the best news in this entire broadcast.
David, say the second part of that because I know what the second part is.
The second part is supply. The United States maintains a strategic stockpile of rabies biologics calibrated to normal demand, and normal demand is roughly 55,000 courses of post-exposure prophylaxis per year, spread evenly across 12 months, driven almost entirely by dog and bat exposures. The stockpile plus commercial inventory in the country tonight is somewhere between 400,000 and 600,000 complete courses. Human rabies immunoglobulin is the tighter constraint because it is derived from the plasma of immunized donors and cannot be manufactured quickly. There are 4 facilities worldwide with meaningful production capacity. 2 are in the United States, 1 is in France, 1 is in India. Total global surge capacity, if every line ran continuously, is on the order of 2 million courses per year. The population of the United States is 335 million.
So the math is the math, and I am not going to pretend otherwise for anybody watching, but I want to say something about what those numbers actually mean tonight, at this hour, for the person watching this in a kitchen somewhere. It means the vaccine works, that is real. It means if you get exposed and you get to it in time, you live. And it means that everything, absolutely everything, now depends on the number of people who need it, staying small enough that the supply matters. Which means the most powerful medical intervention available to most of us tonight is not a needle, it is distance. It is the choice not to be in a room with other people. That is not a comforting answer. But it is a real one, and it is one that every single person watching has the power to act on in the next 5 minutes.
We are approximately 2 hours into the public phase of this event, measuring from the CDC advisory. I want to bring in a guest, and I am grateful to have this guest at this hour. Dr. Avery Whitfield is a virologist specializing in negative-sense RNA viruses, spent 9 years in the lyssavirus program at a federal laboratory, and has published extensively on rabies pathogenesis. Dr. Whitfield joins us by phone from Baltimore. Doctor, I want to start with a question I think everyone is asking. Rabies has been studied for over a century. Louis Pasteur made the first vaccine in 1885. In all that time, it has never spread through the air between people. How does that change?
Thank you for having me, and I am going to try to be useful rather than reassuring, because I think reassurance would be a disservice right now. The short answer is that rabies has always had the capacity to be a respiratory virus and has simply never had the opportunity. That sounds strange, so let me explain. Lyssaviruses are neurotropic. They target nerve tissue. The classical route is that the virus enters muscle tissue through a wound, finds a nerve ending, and then travels up the nerve to the brain, which is why the incubation period depends on how far the bite is from your head. A bite on the face progresses faster than a bite on the foot. That is the textbook. But here is what the textbook does not emphasize. Your olfactory epithelium, the tissue high in your nasal cavity that lets you smell, is nerve tissue that is directly exposed to the outside air. It is the one place in the human body where the central nervous system is essentially open to the environment.
Dr. Whitfield, I want to make sure I am understanding, because that is a genuinely frightening thing you just said. Are you telling us that there has always been a door and this virus has simply learned where it is?
That is a more accurate way of putting it than most of what I have read tonight. Yes, there is a door. We have known about that door for a long time. It is how a handful of extraordinary rabies cases in the historical literature are believed to have happened, cases involving people in caves with enormous bat populations where the aerosol concentration of virus was extreme enough to constitute an inhalational exposure. Those were curiosities. 2 or 3 cases across the entire 20th century, under conditions no ordinary person would ever encounter. What appears to have happened with RV17 is a change in the glycoprotein, the surface protein, the virus uses to attach to cells. If that protein changes its binding preference even slightly toward receptors that are abundant in the upper respiratory tract, then the door stops being a curiosity and becomes a highway. And critically, if the virus can be shed from the respiratory tract, then infected people become the source. That is the mutation that matters, not just getting in through the nose, but coming back out of the mouth.
Doctor, I want to press on the number that determines everything, which is transmissibility. Do we have any estimate of the basic reproduction number? How many people the average infected person passes this to?
The honest answer is that anything I give you tonight will be revised by tomorrow, and I want that caveat carried with the number. The Springfield warehouse cluster gives us the cleanest data because we have shift records, and the preliminary secondary attack rate inside that facility among workers on the same shift over a 6-day period is somewhere between 18 and 26%. That is high, but it is not measles. Measles is a reproduction number of 12 to 18 and would have blanketed that building. The household transmission data suggests a reproduction number in the range of 2.5 to 4. For comparison, seasonal influenza is around 1.3. The original strain of a certain recent coronavirus was around 2.5, so RV17 is roughly in that neighborhood, possibly somewhat above it.
I have to ask the question the number implies, Doctor, and I apologize for asking it so plainly. A reproduction number of 3 with a virus that kills nearly everyone it symptomatically infects. What does that actually mean for people?
It means the case fatality rate is not the number that will determine how this ends. The number that will determine how this ends is how many people are still walking into buildings with other people in them by this time tomorrow. A reproduction number of 3 is not a physical constant. It is a description of human behavior under current conditions. Every time someone stays home, that number goes down. It went down enormously in the last hour because people are watching this and other broadcasts and locking their doors. I want to say that clearly because I think people feel helpless right now, and they are not. The virus has no strategy. It has no plan. It cannot move unless we carry it. And unlike almost every other outbreak in history, we have a prophylaxis that works. We have identified this within 2 weeks of the index case, and the virus has a comparatively short shedding window. Those are 3 enormous advantages. I am not optimistic tonight, but I am not without hope, and those are different things.
Dr. Avery Whitfield, thank you. Please stay reachable because I suspect we will need you again before the sun comes up. Sarah, I want to lay out what we are hearing from the federal side because there has been movement in the last 20 minutes. The Department of Health and Human Services has declared a public health emergency under Section 319, which unlocks emergency funding and regulatory flexibility. The President has activated the National Response Framework at Level 1. Governors in 7 states have activated National Guard units, and I want to be precise about what those units are being tasked with because rumor moves faster than fact tonight. The tasking is logistics and medical support. Specifically, distributing biologics to hospitals, establishing points of dispensing, and providing security at those points. Missouri, Kansas, Illinois, Texas, Tennessee, Colorado, and Oklahoma. Roughly 11,000 personnel so far.
And there is a statement I want to read in full because I think it deserves to be heard in full rather than summarized. It came out about 15 minutes ago from the office of the Governor of Missouri. Effective immediately, all residents of Greene, Christian, Webster, and Jasper counties are directed to remain in their residences except for medical emergencies. All schools, businesses, and houses of worship in these counties are closed. Points of dispensing for preventive treatment will be announced within 4 hours and will operate on a drive-through basis. Do not travel to a hospital unless you are experiencing symptoms. Hospital capacity in southwest Missouri is currently exceeded. To the people of Springfield, I know what I am asking. I am asking you to sit in your homes while you are frightened and to trust that the people working on this have not stopped and will not stop. I have no better answer for you tonight, and I will not insult you by pretending I do.
That last line is unusually candid for an official statement, and I think it tells you something about how the people in those rooms are assessing this. Let me give you the hospital picture, because hospital capacity is the variable that turns a health crisis into a civilizational one. Cox South and Mercy Springfield are the 2 major facilities in that metropolitan area. Combined bed count is roughly 1,200. Combined intensive care capacity, about 140 beds. As of the last update, both facilities are on full diversion, meaning they are accepting no new patients of any kind, including heart attacks, including car accidents, including women in labor. Patients are being routed to Branson, to Joplin, to Rolla. Those facilities are considerably smaller. We are watching a regional medical system fail in real time, and Springfield is a city of 170,000 people. Chicago has 2.7 million.
I want to read something from a viewer who identifies as a nurse in Springfield, and this came in 8 minutes ago. The message says, I am in a supply closet on my break, and I am typing this because I need someone outside this building to know what is happening in here. We have 31 patients in a hallway. We have no more of the medication that calms them, and their families are in the parking lot because we cannot let them in. A man in bed 9 asked me to call his daughter and tell her that the dog needs to go to his sister and not to his brother because his brother will not take care of it. I called her, she was in the parking lot, she was 40 feet from him, and I could not let her in. My shift started 26 hours ago. I am not leaving. None of us are leaving. Tell people we are still here.
We are 3 hours in, and I want to walk through what has changed in the last hour. because the change is not primarily epidemiological, it is behavioral, and behavior is now the whole ballgame. Air traffic control data shows something remarkable. Between 3 and 4 this morning Eastern Time, 140 domestic flights were canceled, and that number is not the result of any federal order. That is, airlines and crews making individual decisions. The Federal Aviation Administration has now issued a ground stop for all commercial departures from Springfield-Branson National Airport, Kansas City International, and Lambert in St. Louis. But the broader shutdown is happening voluntarily and faster than any regulation could impose it.
The pictures coming in from around the country are something I do not think any of us expected at 4 in the morning. There are lines outside pharmacies in Phoenix, Arizona, where there is not a single confirmed case, and those lines started forming before most of the country had heard the word RV-17. Grocery stores in Atlanta opened at 4 to accommodate crowds that were already there. There is a video from a parking lot in Columbus, Ohio, of maybe 200 cars waiting for a store to open, and what strikes me about it, honestly, is how quiet it is. Nobody in that video is shouting. People are standing near their cars with their arms crossed, wearing whatever they grabbed, and there is a kind of terrible politeness to it. Everybody is standing a little further apart than they normally would. They have already learned. In 3 hours, an entire country has already learned.
The pharmaceutical response is the piece I want to detail next, because it is where the outcome of this event will actually be decided. There are 4 manufacturers of rabies vaccine with product licensed in the United States, and I mentioned earlier the immunoglobulin constraint. In the last 90 minutes, 3 of those manufacturers have issued statements confirming they are moving to continuous production. One facility in Pennsylvania has begun converting a line that currently produces a different biologic. The Food and Drug Administration has issued an emergency use authorization allowing intradermal administration rather than intramuscular, and I want to explain why that matters enormously. Intradermal dosing uses roughly 1/5 of the antigen per person. The World Health Organization has recommended intradermal regimens for years in resource-limited settings, and the data on them is good. In effect, that single regulatory decision multiplied the American vaccine supply by a factor of about 4 in the time it takes to sign a document.
That is the first genuinely good thing we have been able to report, and I want to sit on it for a second rather than rushing past it, because I think there is a temptation in a night like this to only relay the falling numbers. Somebody in a room somewhere at 3 in the morning made a decision that turned 400,000 courses into something closer to 1.6 million. Nobody will ever know that person's name. There will not be a statue. But if this country comes out the other side of this week with fewer graves than it might have had, a significant part of the reason is going to be a piece of paperwork signed in the dark by a civil servant who almost certainly had family at home wondering where they were.
We now have international confirmation, and I need to update the map. The Public Health Agency of Canada has confirmed 4 cases in Winnipeg, Manitoba, all with travel or freight links to the central United States. Mexico's Health Secretariat has confirmed 2 cases in Monterrey. The United Kingdom Health Security Agency has confirmed 1 case in Manchester, England, a passenger who flew from Chicago 4 days ago and is currently contact tracing 310 people from that flight and its onward connections. The World Health Organization has convened an emergency committee under the international health regulations and is expected to declare a public health emergency of international concern within hours. Meanwhile, 22 countries have already closed their borders to travelers from the United States. That list includes Japan, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, Singapore, Israel, and every member of the European Union.
We are hearing from Americans abroad, and this is a category of message I did not anticipate. This one is from a viewer named Priya, who is a graduate student in Edinburgh, Scotland. Priya writes, "I found out my country is closed to me from a notification on my phone in a library. My mother is in Chicago. I called her and she was fine, and she was so calm, and she told me not to come home, which I think is the bravest thing anyone has ever said to me. She said, 'Stay where the doors are shut.' I keep thinking that I am going to be one of the people who is safe, and that being safe is going to be the loneliest thing that ever happened to me." Priya, your mother is right, and I want you to hear from someone outside your family that your mother is right. Stay where the doors are shut. And call her again in an hour. Call her every hour.
We are 4 hours in. Updated confirmed figures from the CDC, released moments ago, and the trajectory here is the story. Confirmed cases have gone from 41 to 137. Deaths from 19 to 34. Presumptive cases under investigation from 260 to 1,100. Now, I want to be careful about how those numbers should be read because there is a real risk of misinterpreting them. A significant portion of that increase is not new infection. It is detection catching up to infection that already happened, as hospitals that were filing cases as unexplained encephalitis go back through their records. Confirmed cases now exist in 23 states. The new additions include Atlanta, Georgia, Phoenix, Arizona, Portland, Oregon, Nashville, Tennessee, Detroit, Michigan, Cleveland, Ohio, and Newark, New Jersey.
David, the Portland case is one I want to speak to for a moment because it illustrates something I think people need to understand about how this is moving. That patient is a 54-year-old sorting facility employee, not a driver, not somebody who traveled. Somebody who stood at a conveyor belt and handled boxes that came from Missouri in a building with 300 other people on a shift that runs from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. That is who is getting this first. Warehouse workers, truck drivers, sorting facility employees. The overnight people, the ones who kept everything moving during every other crisis this country has had, who were called essential and then went right back to being invisible. They are the ones standing in front of this thing tonight, and they are standing in front of it because we asked them to.
To add technical detail to Sarah's point, and this is important for public guidance, the CDC advisory addresses the question of surface transmission directly, and the answer should reduce fear rather than increase it. Lyssaviruses are enveloped viruses. They are structurally fragile outside a host. They are inactivated by soap, by alcohol, by sunlight, by drying, and by temperatures above about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The CDC assessment is that transmission via packages or freight surfaces is, and I quote, unlikely to be epidemiologically significant. The reason warehouse workers are overrepresented is not the boxes. It is that they work shoulder to shoulder in enclosed spaces with poor ventilation for 8 to 12 hours at a stretch. The exposure is people, not parcels. If you have a package on your porch tonight, bring it in and wash your hands. That is sufficient.
That is a relief. And I hope people heard it, because I have already seen posts telling people to burn their mail. Please do not burn your mail. The other thing I want to address is what we are seeing in cities where there are no cases at all, because it is now a bigger story in some places than the virus itself. There are reports of significant crowd incidents at retail locations in 5 cities: Sacramento, California, Charlotte, North Carolina, Houston, Texas, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Louisville, Kentucky. Police in Houston report 1 person injured in a crush at a warehouse retail store. And I understand the impulse, I do. I understand the animal part of the brain that says get supplies, protect the people in your house. But every single person in that crowd tonight is standing in the exact conditions this virus needs.
I want to quantify that because I think the quantification is more persuasive than the plea. If Dr. Whitfield's estimated secondary attack rate of roughly 20% in enclosed shared spaces is even approximately right, then a single infected person in a checkout line of 100 people in an enclosed store for 20 minutes could plausibly generate a number of secondary cases in the low double digits. Each of those people then goes home to an average household of 2.5 people. Run that forward 3 generations from 1 grocery store trip and you get numbers in the hundreds. The line outside the store is a more dangerous place tonight than almost anywhere else you could be, including a hospital, because at least at a hospital, everyone is masked. I am not moralizing. I am doing arithmetic.
We are 5 hours in, and the sun is coming up on the East Coast. There is something about that I find almost unbearable, honestly, and I want to name it. There are millions of people about to wake up who do not know yet. They are going to reach for a phone on a nightstand the way they do every morning, and the world is going to be different, and they will find out in the space of about 4 seconds. If you are one of those people, if you just woke up and you are watching this and you are trying to understand what is happening, I want you to know that you have not missed the window to protect yourself and the people you love. Stay in your home. Do not go to work. Keep the people in your house in your house. It has been 5 hours. That is not too late. That is early.
The employment and infrastructure picture is now developing rapidly, and I want to lay out the concrete effects because people need to plan. As of this hour, 41 of the 50 largest school districts in the United States have announced closure. The 3 largest freight railroads have suspended operations into and out of the Central Corridor. The Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach are operating at what officials describe as minimal staffing. Roughly 2/3 of the trucking capacity out of the central United States is stopped, some by order and much of it because drivers are simply not showing up, which I want to be clear is an entirely rational decision by those drivers. What that means practically is that the just-in-time supply chain that stocks American grocery stores, which typically holds about 3 days of inventory at store level, is going to run down before it is resupplied, not because there is no food. There are enormous quantities of food in this country because the people who move it are, correctly, staying home.
And I want to speak directly to the people who are being asked to move it anyway because they exist tonight and they are making a choice that I do not know if I could make. We are hearing from drivers who are running loads of medical supply into Springfield right now, not because anybody is making them. There is a convoy that formed on its own out of a truck stop in Ozark, Missouri, 11 vehicles carrying oxygen concentrators and intravenous fluid and sedatives to Cox South. One of the drivers told a local reporter, and I am quoting from that report, "My wife is a nurse in that building. I am not going to sit at home and let her run out of things while I have a truck. 11 trucks, nobody ordered them, nobody is paying them extra." That happened tonight, in the same country and the same hour as the crush in the parking lot in Houston. Both things are true about us.
The federal response has expanded again in the last 20 minutes, and I want to detail it precisely. The President has invoked the Defense Production Act, specifically Title I and Title III authorities, directing priority allocation for rabies biologics production and authorizing federal investment in expanding manufacturing capacity. Practically, that means the Pennsylvania facility I mentioned earlier now has federal authority to commandeer inputs from other producers, and that plasma collection centers nationwide are being converted to prioritize hyperimmune plasma collection from previously vaccinated donors. Additionally, the Strategic National Stockpile has begun shipping from all 6 of its distribution nodes, and the Department of Defense has been directed to make military medical logistics available. Air Mobility Command has already flown biologics into Springfield and Kansas City. There are also 2 Navy hospital ships being prepared, though I would caution those take weeks, not hours.
There's a statement from the American Nurses Association I want to read because I think it is going to be one of the documents people remember from tonight. To our members, we will not tell you that you are obligated to stay. That is not a decision any organization can make on your behalf, and anyone who tells you otherwise is asking you to carry something that is not theirs to hand you. We will tell you what we know. The prophylaxis works. Fitted respirators reduce transmission substantially. Protect yourself first, without apology and without guilt, because a nurse who becomes a patient helps no one. And to those of you who are still on shift tonight in Springfield, in Kansas City, in Chicago, and in every hospital that has not yet seen its first case, we see you. We know what you are doing. We know exactly what it costs. Go home when you can. Come back when you can. There is no shame in either.
We are 6 hours in. The morning update from the CDC came in during that statement, and I have new figures: confirmed cases 284, deaths 51, presumptive cases under investigation now above 3,000, confirmed cases in 31 states plus the District of Columbia. Now, I want to give you a piece of analysis rather than just a number, because I think the analysis is where the real information is. The doubling time on confirmed cases over the last 4 hours is running at roughly 2.5 hours. But as I said before, that is detection catching up. The number that actually tells us where we are going is presumptive cases in states with no known freight link to Springfield, because that indicates community transmission independent of the original vector. 4 hours ago, that number was effectively 0. It is now 14 across 6 states. That is the number I am watching, and I will report it every time it changes.
We have a viewer message that I want to read carefully from someone who identifies as a respiratory therapist in Kansas City, Missouri. I have intubated 4 people tonight who did not have anything wrong with their lungs. That is not what this does. What it does is take away the part of the brain that tells you to swallow and to breathe in an ordered way, so people drown in the air. We are sedating people and putting them on ventilators, and I need people to understand that we are not doing that to save them, because we cannot save them at that stage. We are doing it so they are not awake for it. I have a daughter who is 11. My mother has her. I have not been home in 2 days. I am telling you this because someone asked me tonight if what we are doing matters, and I want it written down somewhere that it does. Being not alone at the end is not nothing. It is the whole job.
I want to bring in our second guest, and this is someone whose perspective is going to be essential over the coming hours. Colonel Reese Marchetti is a retired military physician who spent 11 years in biological defense planning, including as a lead planner on the National Pandemic Response Framework. Colonel Marchetti joins us from Fort Collins, Colorado. Colonel, thank you for being here. I want to ask a hard question first. Every plan I have ever read for a respiratory pandemic assumes a case fatality rate under 5%, because that is what history gives us. What happens to those plans when the fatality rate is essentially 100%?
David, thank you, and I will answer that directly. Every plan breaks. I helped write some of them, and I am telling you, they break. Not because the logistics are wrong, but because every plan of that type rests on an assumption we never wrote down, which is that a certain percentage of people will keep going to work. 95% survival is a number a person can rationalize. A nurse can look at that and decide the risk is acceptable. A truck driver can look at that and decide to take the load. When the number becomes near certain death, that calculus does not just shift, it inverts. And every model that assumed 80% workforce continuity is now describing a world that does not exist. That is the actual crisis in front of us in the next 12 hours. Not beds, not vaccine, staffing.
Colonel, I want to ask you about something you just said, because you said it very evenly, and I do not think it is an even thing. You said the calculus inverts, but we are watching people stay. 11 trucks left a truck stop in Ozark on their own tonight. Nurses in Springfield are on hour 26. How do you account for that in your planning?
I do not account for it. And that is the honest answer. And it is the thing that 30 years in this field has taught me that no model will ever capture. We can model virus, we can model supply chains, freight, bed counts, and cold chain capacity. We cannot model why a person walks toward a thing that will probably kill them because someone else is inside it. In every event I have ever studied, from Ebola treatment units in West Africa to fire crews walking into structures that were already lost, the number of people who stayed exceeded the planning estimate every time. So I write the pessimistic number down because that is my job, and then people exceed it, and I have never once been able to predict by how much. If there is a reason for hope tonight, it is not in my spreadsheets, it is in that gap.
Colonel, let me ask about the intervention that I think everybody is anticipating and dreading. Are we going to see domestic movement restrictions, and what does the federal government actually have the authority to do?
The authority is broader than most people assume and narrower than most people fear. Under Section 361 of the Public Health Service Act and the accompanying regulations, the federal government has clear authority to prevent interstate and international spread of communicable disease, which includes quarantine. That has been used most notably in a limited way during previous events. But authority on paper and capability on the ground are different things. There are roughly 4 million miles of public road in the United States. You cannot cordon a country of that size. What you can actually do, and what I would expect to see within hours, is a suspension of commercial passenger aviation, restrictions at the international borders, and something closer to a national appeal for people to stay in place, enforced mostly by the fact that people will voluntarily comply. Compliance is not going to be the problem tonight. If anything, people are ahead of the government.
Colonel Reese Marchetti, thank you, and please stay with us tonight if you can. David, we are 7 hours in, and I want to talk about the power situation because it has just moved from a worry to a fact. There are confirmed outages affecting an estimated 400,000 customers across Missouri, Arkansas, and eastern Kansas, and the cause is not damage. There is no storm. Nothing has broken. Utility officials in 2 of those states are saying essentially that control room and field crew staffing has fallen below the level needed to maintain the grid, and that when a fault occurs, there is nobody available to go and reset it. A tree branch that would normally cause a 30-minute outage is now causing a 6-hour one, and the outages are accumulating.
Let me put a technical frame on that, because grid failure is the mechanism by which this event could become far worse than the virus itself. The North American electrical grid requires continuous active management. Generation must be balanced against load, second, by human beings in control rooms. Those rooms are staffed by a small number of highly trained operators who cannot be replaced on short notice. There is no automation that substitutes for them at the transmission level. Now consider the cascade. Grid instability takes down water treatment, which requires electric pumping. It takes down natural gas compressor stations, which affects heating. It takes down cellular networks after generator fuel is exhausted, typically 24 to 72 hours. And critically, it takes down the refrigeration that vaccine cold chain depends on. Rabies vaccine must be maintained between 36 and 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Above that range, it degrades.
So the cure needs the power to stay on.
The cure needs the power to stay on, and that is why I want to say something to a very specific and very small group of people who may be watching this, and I do not usually address a broadcast to a dozen individuals, but tonight I am going to. If you are a transmission system operator, a water treatment plant operator, a natural gas control room technician, or a substation crew member, you are, at this hour, among the most important people in this country. More important than anyone in any Capitol building. What you do in the next 12 hours determines whether the people trying to save lives have light, water, and functioning refrigerators to do it with. I have no right to ask anything of you, and I am not going to. I am only going to tell you that we know, and that if this works, it will be because of you.
We have a message from someone in exactly that category, and it came in while David was speaking. This viewer identifies only as a control room operator in Arkansas. There are 4 of us here, and normally there are 11. We brought cots. My relief is not coming, and I do not blame my relief. We have food for maybe 2 days and a generator with about 40 hours of diesel. I saw what your anchor said just now about us mattering, and I want you to know that all 4 of us are sitting here, and one of us is crying, and none of us are leaving. I have a son who is 19. He wanted to come here and sit with me, and I told him absolutely not. Tell people to turn things off. Every air conditioner off is one less thing I have to hold up. That is a real thing they can do for us. I am going to repeat that because it is the most actionable thing anybody has said to us tonight. Turn things off. If you are in a home with power right now, go turn off your air conditioning, your water heater if you can, anything drawing current that you do not need in the next hour. There are 4 people in a room in Arkansas holding up the grid for a region, and you can make their job measurably easier from your hallway in the next 60 seconds. That is not a symbolic gesture. That is load, and load is the thing that is going to break them.
We are 8 hours in, and I want to close this hour with the honest state of the numbers and the honest state of what we do not know. Confirmed cases, 406. Deaths, 73. Presumptive cases, above 5,000. 37 states. Community transmission with no freight link, now 31 clusters across 11 states, up from 14 2 hours ago, and that is the number that tells me this is no longer a Springfield story. It is everywhere, and it was everywhere before we knew. Internationally, confirmed cases now in Canada, Mexico, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Germany, the Netherlands, Japan, and Brazil. 91 countries have closed borders to American travelers. The World Health Organization declared a public health emergency of international concern 18 minutes ago.
And in the middle of all of that, David, I want to end this hour on the thing I keep coming back to, which is that the last 8 hours have produced 2 kinds of news, and both have been arriving at the same rate. Every hour has brought us a rising number, and every hour has also brought us 11 trucks, 4 people on cots, a pathologist who would not let a file close, a nurse making a phone call about a dog. I do not know which of those two stories is going to be the bigger one when the sun goes down tonight. Nobody watching knows, but I have covered a lot of nights in this chair, and I have never seen a country get to the second kind of story this fast. 8 hours. That is all it took for people to start turning toward each other. Stay with us. We are not going anywhere.
We are 8 hours and 11 minutes into this event, and I want to reset the picture for anyone who is joining us now, because I know a great many people are only now waking up, or only now turning on a set, or only now finding a signal. Here is what has happened. A strain of rabies virus, designated by the Centers for Disease Control as variant designation Rabies-7, has been confirmed to transmit through the air, not through a bite, not through saliva contact with an open wound, through the air in the way a cold moves through an office. The first cluster was identified in Springfield, Missouri, approximately 14 hours ago by hospital timestamps, though the earliest infections we can now reconstruct occurred 4 to 6 days before that. The incubation period, which for classical rabies runs 1 to 3 months, appears in this variant to run somewhere between 18 hours and 4 days. That compression is the single most important number in this entire event, and it is the reason we are where we are.
And I want to say something about the phrase, where we are, because I think for a lot of people the last hour has been the hour where this stopped being a news story about somewhere else. Our inbox has changed character. 8 hours ago, we were getting messages from people in Missouri and Arkansas. In the last 40 minutes, we have received messages from Portland, Oregon, from Burlington, Vermont, from Anchorage, from a woman writing from a fishing village on the coast of Maine that I had to look up on a map. And the messages are not asking us what is happening anymore. They are telling us, that is a shift, David. The audience has stopped being an audience. Tonight they are reporters, and in some cases they are the only reporters in the places they are.
That shift is reflected in the official data as well, and I want to walk through the newest release carefully. The CDC has just published its first formal situation report, and it contains 4 numbers I want on the record. Confirmed laboratory positive cases, 491. Deaths attributed to the variant, 94. Presumptive cases, meaning patients presenting with the full symptom triad and no alternative explanation, an estimated 6,200. And healthcare worker infections specifically, 118, which is a number that is going to matter enormously in about 6 hours. Geographic spread, 39 states plus the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and Guam. Guam is significant because it indicates an aviation vector that predates any restriction we have put in place.
118 healthcare workers. I want to sit on that for a moment before we move on, because David is right that it is going to matter operationally, but it matters in another way too. Those are 118 people who knew exactly what they were walking into. Not one of them was surprised. By the time this thing was 6 hours old, every nurse and every respiratory therapist and every emergency physician in this country knew what airborne meant and knew what the survival rate was, and they put on whatever they had and they walked into the room anyway. There is a particular kind of courage in doing something dangerous when you do not understand the danger. There is a completely different and much harder kind in doing it when you understand it perfectly.
The operational consequence is straightforward and grim. Emergency departments run on thin margins of specialized staff. A mid-sized hospital might have 4 emergency physicians on shift and 11 nurses covering a 40-bed department. If you remove 3 of those nurses to quarantine, you do not lose 27% of capacity. You lose considerably more because the remaining staff must now also absorb the patients who require intensive monitoring. What we are seeing reported out of Kansas City, Tulsa, Little Rock, and now Memphis is not hospitals at capacity. Hospitals reached capacity 6 hours ago. What we are seeing now is hospitals that have stopped functioning as hospitals and have become functionally shelters with medical staff present.
We have a statement to read from the Missouri Hospital Association, released 19 minutes ago, and I am going to read it in full because it is unusually direct for an organization of that kind. The Missouri Hospital Association advises the public that as of this hour, 31 member facilities are unable to accept new patients of any type, including trauma, cardiac, and obstetric emergencies. This is not a triage decision. These facilities have no available personnel. Residents experiencing a medical emergency unrelated to the current outbreak should be aware that emergency medical services in much of the state are not currently able to respond. We understand the gravity of what we are communicating. We would rather the public know the truth than wait for an ambulance that is not coming.
That last sentence is one I would encourage every state hospital association in the country to copy verbatim, because the alternative to telling people the truth is people making plans based on a system that no longer exists. And I want to put a number to what that means, because it is easy to hear ambulances are not coming and hear only the outbreak. In an average 24-hour period in the United States, roughly 350,000 people experience an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, stroke, traumatic injury, or obstetric emergency requiring immediate response. Those events do not pause. Every hour the emergency system is degraded. That is a separate and parallel casualty stream that will not appear in any outbreak count. The people who die of a heart attack tonight in a house in Joplin because nobody came will be a footnote, and they should not be.
We are going to bring back Dr. Avery Whitfield, who has been on with us twice tonight and who has now been awake, by Dr. Whitfield's own account, for 31 hours. Doctor, thank you for coming back. When we last spoke, you told us the laboratory work on this variant was moving faster than anything you had seen. It is now 8.5 hours later. What do you know now that you did not know then?
3 things, and one of them is good, which is more than I expected to be able to say. First, we have a complete genome. It was sequenced in Atlanta and independently confirmed in Winnipeg and in Rotterdam. It is rabies. It is unambiguously rabies, lyssavirus genus, and that matters because it means the existing vaccine platform is theoretically relevant. Second, we have identified the structural change. There is a substitution in the glycoprotein and a second change in the matrix protein, and the combined effect is that the virus can replicate in the upper respiratory epithelium, which classical rabies cannot do. That is the entire story of this outbreak in one sentence. Classical rabies has to get into a nerve ending through a wound. This one sets up shop in your nose and throat first, and then finds the nerve. Third, and this is the good part, the change that lets it do that appears to come with a cost. Environmental stability is poor. Aerosolized particles appear to lose infectivity in something on the order of 90 seconds to 4 minutes in open air, and considerably faster in direct sunlight or in air above about 85 degrees Fahrenheit.
Doctor, I want to make sure our viewers understand the practical implication of that third finding, because I believe it is the most useful thing anyone has said on this broadcast tonight. If the infectious particle degrades in 90 seconds to 4 minutes in open air, then what you are describing is a virus that spreads efficiently indoors and poorly outdoors. Is that a fair restatement?
That is exactly the restatement, and I want people to hear it clearly. Almost every cluster we have mapped tonight is an indoor cluster. A church basement in Nixa, a packing floor in Springfield, a casino in Joplin, a nursing home dining room, a distribution warehouse, 2 long-distance buses. What we have not seen anywhere in any state is an outdoor transmission cluster. Not one. A farmer's market, a parking lot, a park, a porch, nothing. So the guidance I would give, and I am aware I am giving it on television rather than through an agency, is this: being outdoors is close to safe. Being indoors with people who are not in your household is dangerous. Being indoors with recirculated air and no ventilation is very dangerous. If you must be with other people tonight, be with them outside and be 6 feet apart and stay upwind if there is a wind.
Doctor, that is going to change what a lot of people do in the next hour, and I am grateful for it. I want to ask you something that is not scientific. You have been awake for 31 hours. You are on television in the middle of the worst night this country has had in a very long time. What is it actually like in that building right now?
It is quiet. That is the thing I did not expect. I have worked outbreaks before, and outbreaks are loud. They are people shouting across rooms and phones ringing and somebody always looking for a printer. This is silent. There are maybe 200 people in this facility, and nobody is talking above a normal speaking voice. Everyone is doing exactly one thing and doing it very carefully. The person running the sequencing bench across from me has not spoken a full sentence in 4 hours and is producing work I would be proud of on a good day with a full night's sleep. Somebody brought in about 40 pizzas around midnight and left them in the corridor, and half of them are still there because people forgot to eat. That is what it is like. It is the most competent room I have ever stood in, and I hope it is enough.
Doctor, one final question and then we will let you get back. Vaccine. The existing rabies post-exposure prophylaxis regimen. Does it work against this variant, and if so, how much of it exists?
It works. We have neutralization data from 3 separate laboratories as of about 90 minutes ago, and the existing human rabies immune globulin and the existing vaccine both neutralize this variant in vitro. That is not the same as clinical efficacy, but it is enormously better than the alternative. The problem is not whether it works. The problem is that global annual production of rabies vaccine is somewhere around 15 to 20 million doses, distributed across roughly 4 major manufacturers, and the standard post-exposure course is 4 doses over 14 days. So if you do the arithmetic, you find that the entire planet's yearly output covers something under 5 million people. And that supply is currently sitting in warehouses and clinics scattered across every continent, much of it in places that are now closed. We are not short. We are catastrophically short. That is the truth, and I would rather people hear it from me than discover it in a parking lot.
Dr. Avery Whitfield, thank you. Please eat one of those pizzas. We will come back to you when you have more. David, we are 8 hours and 40 minutes in, and I want to follow the thread Dr. Whitfield just handed us, because catastrophically short is a phrase that is going to arrive at somebody's front door in a very concrete way in the next hour, and I think we should get ahead of what that looks like.
We should, and I want to be precise about the allocation problem, because there is going to be an enormous amount of anger directed at it, and some of that anger will be misdirected. The Federal Strategic National Stockpile does hold rabies biologics. The publicly known figure from congressional testimony is in the range of several 100,000 doses of vaccine and a substantially smaller quantity of immune globulin, because immune globulin is derived from human plasma and cannot be manufactured quickly at any price. Several 100,000 doses against 6,000 presumptive cases sounds adequate. It is not, and here is why. Post-exposure prophylaxis is only effective before symptom onset, with an incubation period of 18 hours to 4 days. The window in which the vaccine helps a given person may be measured in hours. You cannot run a national allocation process in hours. The logistics of the thing are slower than the disease.
So what happens in practice is that it goes to the people you can reach fastest, which in practice means healthcare workers and first responders, and I want to defend that decision before anyone attacks it. If you have 1,000 doses and you can give them to 1,000 random people or to 1,000 nurses, the 1,000 nurses will save more lives than the 1,000 random people will by a very large factor. That is not favoritism, that is arithmetic. But I also know that arithmetic is going to be very cold comfort to a father in Springfield tonight who is watching a hospital worker receive something his daughter cannot get, and I do not want anyone watching to think we do not understand how that feels.
The Department of Health and Human Services has now issued an allocation directive, and I am going to read the operative section. Effective immediately, all federal, state, and commercial inventories of rabies vaccine and rabies immune globulin are subject to federal allocation authority. Priority Tier 1 comprises healthcare personnel with direct patient contact, emergency medical services personnel, and laboratory personnel working with the variant. Priority Tier 2 comprises critical infrastructure personnel as defined in the attached schedule, including electrical transmission operators, water treatment operators, and telecommunications field technicians. Priority Tier 3 comprises individuals with documented high-risk exposure. All other administration is suspended. Facilities holding inventory are directed to report quantities within 2 hours. Diversion, concealment, or unauthorized administration of allocated inventory constitutes a federal offense.
Tier 2 includes the control room operators. I want to point that out specifically because we read a message on this program about an hour ago from an operator in Arkansas sitting in a room with 3 colleagues and 40 hours of diesel, and somebody in a government office was listening or arrived at the same conclusion independently, and those 4 people are now on a priority list. I do not know if that is because of this broadcast, and I would never claim it was, but if you are those 4 people and you are still watching, somebody knows you are there. Somebody wrote you into a federal document. Hold on.
I want to move to the international picture because there have been significant developments in the last hour, and they changed the shape of this event considerably. The World Health Organization's public health emergency declaration has now been followed by what is effectively a global aviation shutdown. As of this hour, commercial passenger aviation has been suspended entirely within the United States, Canada, Mexico, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, Belgium, Poland, Japan, South Korea, and Australia. India and Brazil have suspended international arrivals but continue domestic service. Roughly 130 countries have now closed borders to travelers originating in North America. Approximately 11,000 aircraft that were in the air when these orders took effect have been directed to their nearest suitable airfield.
And there are people on those aircraft, which is a detail I have not stopped thinking about. 11,000 planes, call it an average of 140 souls each. That is somewhere north of 1.5 million people who woke up this morning going somewhere ordinary and are now sitting on a tarmac in a country they did not choose, in a cabin with recirculated air, hearing this news through a phone. We have received messages from at least 9 of those aircraft. I am going to read one. This came from a passenger on a diverted flight now on the ground at Keflavik in Iceland. We were supposed to land in Boston. We are in Iceland. The captain came on and told us the truth, all of it, and did not make it sound better than it is. A man 4 rows up started coughing and the whole cabin went quiet, and then a flight attendant walked down the aisle and sat in the empty seat next to him and talked to him for 20 minutes. I do not know that flight attendant's name. I will think about that for the rest of my life, however long that is.
I have no data to add to that, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. Let me instead give you the military and continuity picture, which has developed substantially. The Department of Defense has raised force protection condition to Delta at all domestic installations, which is the highest level and is not routine. Approximately 80,000 National Guard personnel have been activated across 41 states, with missions specified as infrastructure protection, medical logistics support, and mortuary affairs. That third category is included in the public tasking order, which tells you the planners are being realistic. Continuity of government procedures have been implemented, meaning senior officials have been geographically dispersed. 2 aircraft carriers have put to sea from Norfolk and San Diego with reduced complements, which is a standard measure to preserve a portion of the force outside the transmission environment.
We are 9 hours in, and I want to take a few minutes here to read viewer messages because we have now received, by our count, somewhere over 400,000, and there is no world in which we get through a meaningful fraction of them, but I want the ones we do read to be the right ones. This first one is from Wichita, Kansas. I am a mail carrier. Nobody told me to stop, so I did my route. Most houses, I just left it in the box. 11 houses had notes taped to the door asking me to knock so they would know someone came. So I knocked on 11 doors and stood back in the yard and waved. One of them was Mrs. Petrosian, who is 91, and she came to the window and waved back with both hands. I will do the route again tomorrow, if there is a tomorrow. This one is from Duluth, Minnesota. My husband died of this 4 hours ago in a hospital hallway. I was not allowed in. A nurse whose name I never got held a phone up to his ear so I could talk to him, and I do not know if he heard me. I am writing to you because I want somebody to write it down that his name was mentioned on television. He was a good man, and he fixed appliances for 40 years, and half this town has a washing machine he kept alive past its time. I am not angry at anybody. I just wanted it written down. Ma'am, it is written down, it is on the air, it is in the record of this broadcast, and every person watching heard it. That is the only thing we have to give, and we are giving it.
I want to do something slightly unusual here and connect that message to the data, because there is a thing happening in the mortality statistics that I think that viewer just explained better than any epidemiologist could. The case fatality rate we are computing tonight, which is running at roughly 19% of confirmed cases, is almost certainly wrong, and it is wrong in the direction of optimism. Classical rabies, once symptomatic, is essentially 100% fatal. There are fewer than 20 documented survivors in all of recorded medicine. The reason our number reads 19% is that most of the people who became symptomatic in the last 6 hours have not died yet. They are dying in hallways right now, in Duluth and in 40 other places, and they will enter the count over the next 12 to 36 hours. I want people to be prepared for the number to move sharply, and I want them to understand that when it moves, it is not because things got worse. It is because the arithmetic caught up.
That is a hard thing to say, and I am glad you said it, because the alternative is that in 6 hours, people see a number triple and conclude that something new has happened and nothing new will have happened. David, I want to move to what is going on in cities, because the reports coming in from urban centers in the last hour have changed in character, and I think our viewers in those places need to hear it plainly rather than discover it.
They have changed, and I will characterize it carefully because there is a great deal of unverified material circulating. What we can confirm: in Chicago, Illinois, the Regional Transportation Authority suspended all rail and bus service approximately 50 minutes ago, citing operator absenteeism above 60%. In Atlanta, Georgia, the MARTA system is down. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, SEPTA is running roughly a fifth of scheduled service. In New York City, the subway is operating but at reduced frequency, and the Metropolitan Transportation Authority has stated it intends to maintain some level of service, which under the circumstances I consider a remarkable institutional commitment. Retail, major grocery chains, including operations in Texas, California, Ohio, and Florida, have reported store closures driven by staffing, not by damage. Fuel. Approximately 18% of retail fuel stations in the affected Central Corridor are reporting no product available.
And we should say what is happening at some of those stores, because there are two very different things happening and both are real. In some places there are lines and people are waiting and taking what they need and leaving things for the person behind them. We have photographs from a store in Fargo, North Dakota, where somebody put a handwritten sign on the shelf that said, "2 per family, please. There are kids behind you," and by all accounts people followed it without anyone enforcing it. In other places it has gone badly. There has been looting reported in at least 6 cities. There have been fights. A person was seriously injured in a parking lot in Bakersfield, California, over a case of bottled water. I am not going to pretend the first story is the whole story, but I am also not going to let the second story be the whole story, because it is not.
Law enforcement posture has shifted accordingly. At least 22 municipalities have declared curfews. What I would flag for viewers is that police departments are experiencing the same absenteeism as every other institution, with several major departments reporting sworn officer availability below 50%. The practical meaning is that a curfew declared tonight in most American cities is an appeal rather than an enforcement action. There are not enough officers to enforce anything against a population that decides not to comply. Which brings us back to the point Colonel Marchetti made to us 2 hours ago. Everything that happens in this country in the next 12 hours happens because people choose to do it, not because anyone makes them.
We are 9 hours and 35 minutes in, and I want to talk about children, because we have received an extraordinary number of messages about children, and I have been putting them off, and I should not. There are, right now, an unknown number of kids in this country who are alone. Some because a parent went to a hospital and did not come back. Some because a parent is a nurse or a lineman or a trucker and made a decision to go to work. Some because a parent is in a room down the hall and told them through a door not to come in. I have read 40 of these messages in the last 20 minutes, and I want to read 2. This one is from a girl who says she is 14 in Columbia, Missouri. My mom is in her room and she is sick, and she said, "Do not open the door no matter what and put food outside it." I have been doing that for 6 hours. She talks to me through the door. She is making me laugh on purpose, I think. She made me write down where the insurance papers are and where our cousin lives in Iowa. I have a little brother who is 6, and he thinks she has the flu, and I am letting him think that. I do not know if I am doing this right. Somebody tell me if I am doing this right. Sweetheart, you are doing it exactly right. Every single thing on that list is right. Keep the door closed. Keep talking to her. Let your brother believe what he believes for as long as you can. You are 14 years old, and you are running a household better than most adults would tonight, and if there is any justice in the world, somebody will come and help you before morning.
I want to give that viewer and everyone in a similar position something operational, because Sarah is right about the emotional truth of it, and I can add a practical layer. If you are a minor caring for a sick adult, the highest value things you can do are these. Keep the door closed and keep a window open in your own space if the weather permits, because ventilation matters enormously with this pathogen. Do not enter the room. If you must pass items, leave them and step back. Write down the sick person's name, date of birth, and any medications on a piece of paper and tape it to the outside of that door, because if help arrives, that piece of paper saves 15 minutes. And write your own name and your brother's name and your cousin's address on a second piece of paper and put it in your pocket. Not because anything is going to happen to you, because information in a pocket is how people find each other.
The second message is from a man in Salt Lake City, Utah. I am 78 and my wife died 2 years ago, and I live alone in a building with 14 apartments. Tonight I went and knocked on every door and asked who needed something. There are 3 people on my floor I have never spoken to in 9 years. One is a young woman with a baby and no car. One is a guy in his 40s who I think was already having a hard year. One is a couple who do not speak much English, and we managed anyway. We are all in a text group now. I have a full pantry because I never stopped shopping like my wife was still here. I am the oldest person in this building, and I am probably the most likely to die, and I have decided I am going to be the one who does the errands. That is my job. I have been looking for one. I do not have anything to add to that. I do not think anyone does.
Then let me take us to 10 hours, where we now are, with the numbers, because I think the discipline of returning to the numbers is worth something even when the numbers are bad. Confirmed cases, 687. Deaths, 141. Presumptive cases, an estimated 9,400. 43 states. Community transmission clusters with no traceable link to Springfield, now 58 across 19 states. Healthcare worker infections, 196. And a new category the CDC has begun reporting separately, which is infections among household contacts of confirmed cases, currently 311. And that number tells us something important, which is that household attack rate appears to be high. If you live with a symptomatic person in an enclosed space, you are very likely to be infected.
Which means every one of those messages about a door and a tray of food is a real strategy and not just a gesture. David, we are getting word that Colonel Reese Marchetti is available again, and I would like to bring the Colonel back in because the military posture has changed twice since we last spoke, and I want our viewers to hear it from someone who understands it rather than from a rumor.
Colonel Marchetti, thank you for staying with us. 80,000 Guard personnel activated, Force Protection Condition Delta, 2 carrier groups underway. Walk us through what those decisions are actually for, because I think the public hears military deployment and imagines something very different from what is being planned.
I will, and let me start with what it is not for. It is not for crowd control. Nobody in any planning cell in this country tonight is drawing up plans to point rifles at American citizens over a virus. And if you see that claim online, you should discount it heavily. Here is what 80,000 guardsmen actually do. First, generator fuel. There are roughly 11,000 critical facilities in this country running on backup power tonight. Hospitals, water plants, cell switching centers, and each one holds somewhere between 24 and 96 hours of diesel. Somebody has to drive tanker trucks to those facilities on a continuous rotation for as long as this lasts. That is thousands of drivers, and it is the single largest tasking. Second, medical logistics. Moving vaccine, moving oxygen, moving personnel. Third, and I'm going to say it plainly because your colleague already did, mortuary affairs. We are going to exceed the civilian capacity of this country to handle its dead within about 36 hours, and somebody has to be ready for that with dignity and with records.
Colonel, that word dignity is the one I want to ask about. When you say mortuary affairs, most people picture something from a war. What does dignity look like in the plan? Because I think a lot of families watching tonight are afraid of exactly that, of losing someone and losing them twice.
It means every person gets a record. That is the core of it. Name, location found, time, personal effects, inventor deed and retained, and a designated place of interment or refrigerated holding that is documented and can be traced by a family member 6 months or 6 years from now. In every operation I have been part of, the thing that destroys families afterward is not the loss. It is not knowing. So the standard, and it is a written standard, is that no remains are handled without a record. It will be imperfect. Some records will be lost. But I want families to hear that the people doing this work were trained for it, and they take it as seriously as anything they have ever done. Nobody is going to disappear tonight without somebody writing down that they were here.
Colonel, on the international military picture, there are reports of unusual activity from several nations, and I want to give you the opportunity to characterize what is real and what is not.
What is real? Multiple nations have raised alert levels, which is normal and expected when a peer nation experiences internal disruption. It is not hostile, it is prudent. Every defense ministry on earth is asking the same question tonight, which is what happens to the world if the United States is degraded for 6 weeks? And they are all quietly making sure their own house is in order. What I would tell your viewers is that the communication channels between major powers are open and are being used heavily tonight. There have been direct conversations at the senior military level with at least 4 nations in the last 6 hours, all of them essentially amounting to a mutual statement that nobody is going to do anything opportunistic while this is happening. I have been doing this a long time, and I will tell you that is not always the case in a crisis. Tonight it is the case. I take some comfort in that, and I think the public should too.
Colonel Reese Marchetti, thank you. We will come back to you. David, we are 10 hours and 20 minutes in, and I want to change the subject entirely for a moment because we have been given something I have never had happen on a broadcast before. A hospital in Little Rock, Arkansas has been sending us updates directly, not through a press office. A charge nurse has been sending short messages every 20 minutes or so for the last 4 hours, and with permission, we have been holding them. I want to read them in order because together they are the clearest picture anyone has of what a night shift looks like inside this thing. The first one, 4 hours ago. 42 in the department. Capacity is 26. We are doubling rooms. 3 of my nurses are out. Everyone else stayed. Second, 3 hours ago. We ran out of the good masks. Facilities found a case of them in a storage room from 4 years ago, and they are expired, but they are better than nothing, so we are wearing expired masks, and nobody complained. Third, 2 hours ago. A man in Bay 9 is a retired respiratory therapist. He is symptomatic. He has been telling my youngest nurse how to manage the ventilator settings on the patient next to him. He is dying, and he is teaching. Fourth, 1 hour ago. The retired therapist died at 4:17. My youngest nurse used what he taught her about 90 minutes later on a woman in Bay 4, and it worked. That woman is still alive right now. And the last one, 11 minutes ago, shift change was supposed to be an hour ago. Nobody left, not one person. We are all still here. Tell people we are still here.
There is a technical term in emergency management for what that hospital is doing. It is called degraded operations, and the models assume that a facility in degraded operations loses effectiveness in a predictable curve as staff are lost. The models do not have a variable for people refusing to go home. I have spent a good part of my career reading those models, and I want to be honest that if you had shown me this scenario a week ago and asked me to predict staff retention at hour 10, I would have given you a number substantially worse than what we are observing. The models are wrong tonight. They are wrong in the good direction. I do not know how long that holds, but at hour 10 it is holding.
We are going to take a moment now for something practical because our lines have been flooded with people asking the same 4 questions, and I want to answer them all at once with the best information we have. First, should I go to a hospital if I have symptoms? Based on what Dr. Whitfield has told us and what the CDC has published, if you have the specific symptom pattern, which is difficulty swallowing, sensitivity to light or sound, agitation and fever, and you are near a facility that is still accepting patients, yes, because early treatment before neurological involvement is your only chance. If your local facility is closed, going there will not help you and may expose you further. Call first if the phones work.
Second question, and it is the most common one we are receiving. What are the actual symptoms, and how do I tell this apart from ordinary illness? The published case definition has 4 elements. Prodromal phase, which is 1 to 8 hours in this variant, consisting of fever typically between 101 and 103 degrees Fahrenheit, sore throat, and a sensation described by patients as anxiety without cause. Then neurological onset, which includes hydrophobia, meaning painful spasms on attempting to swallow liquid, aerophobia, meaning spasms triggered by moving air across the face, photophobia, and hypersalivation. then agitation alternating with lucidity, then paralysis and coma. I am going to say the most distinguishing feature clearly. If you can drink a glass of water normally, you almost certainly do not have this. That is not a medical guarantee. It is the single most useful screening test available to a person at home.
Third question, is it safe to be around my own family? If nobody in your household has left the house in the last 12 hours and nobody has come in, you are almost certainly safe with each other, and I want people to hear that because we are getting messages from families who have separated themselves inside their own homes out of fear and are sitting alone in 4 different rooms tonight. If you have been together and isolated, be together. Fourth question, and this is the one that breaks my heart. People are asking whether they can be with someone who is dying. And the honest answer is that if you go into that room, you will very likely be infected, and that is a decision no broadcast can make for anybody. I will only say that we have received messages from people who made that choice, and none of them, not one, expressed regret.
Let me update the international numbers, which have moved considerably in the last 90 minutes. Confirmed cases outside the United States, 319, across 26 countries. The largest foreign clusters are in Toronto, Canada, with 41 confirmed, Mexico City, Mexico, with 33, London, United Kingdom, with 29, and Frankfurt, Germany, with 22. All 4 are aviation-linked, and all 4 are believed to trace to flights that departed the United States within the last 30 hours. Japan has reported 11 cases in Tokyo, and has implemented the most aggressive containment measure of any nation, which is a complete suspension of all internal rail service, a step I would not have predicted and which reflects a very serious institutional assessment.
And there is something happening internationally that I want to make sure gets airtime because it would be easy for it to get lost. 91 countries closed borders to Americans, and that is the headline. But underneath the headline, 17 countries have publicly offered material assistance. India's largest vaccine manufacturer has announced it is converting production lines and has stated it will not charge for the output. South Korea has offered its entire national stockpile of rabies immune globulin, which is not large but is being offered anyway. The government of Ireland has offered to take in unaccompanied minors, and I do not fully know what that means logistically, but I know what it means as a sentence. Cuba has offered medical personnel. New Zealand has offered laboratory capacity. There is a version of this night where the world locked its doors and turned away, and that is not the version we are getting.
11 hours. Updated figures. Confirmed cases, 894. Deaths, 207. Presumptive and estimated 13,000. 45 states. And a figure I want to flag because it represents a change in the character of this event. Hospitals reporting complete cessation of patient intake, 109 facilities nationally. That is not a triage designation. That is 109 buildings that were hospitals this morning and are now something else. Power. Outages have expanded to an estimated 1,100,000 customers across Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and now southern Illinois. Telecommunications. 3 major carriers report cell site outages exceeding 15% in the Central Corridor, mostly generator exhaustion.
1,100,000 customers means roughly 2.5 million people sitting in the dark right now, many of them without any way to receive information. And I want to speak to a group of people who cannot hear me, which is a strange thing to do on television, but there is a chance somebody with a working radio is sitting next to somebody without one. If you have power and your neighbor does not, the single most valuable thing you own tonight is not your food, it is your ability to know things. Go tell them, write it on a piece of paper and put it in a mailbox if you have to. The information gap is going to kill people tonight who would otherwise have been fine.
On that point, I want to note something that is quietly one of the most important developments of the night. The Federal Communications Commission and the National Association of Broadcasters have jointly issued guidance that has resulted in something close to a total suspension of normal commercial broadcasting. As of this hour, an estimated 11,000 radio stations in the United States are carrying either this feed, a network pool feed, or their own local emergency programming. That includes stations that have never carried news of any kind. There are country music stations in West Texas reading CDC case definitions between records right now. There is a Spanish language station in Los Angeles that has been running continuously since hour 3 with a staff of 2. Radio, the oldest and least glamorous thing in this building, is the backbone of the American information system tonight.
And it is going to matter more, not less, as the power goes. A battery radio does not need a cell tower or a data plan or a working modem. Somebody in a farmhouse outside Emporia, Kansas, with a $9 radio and 4D batteries knows exactly as much tonight as somebody in a penthouse in Manhattan. I have been in this business a long time, and there is something in that I find genuinely moving. The technology that everyone said was obsolete turns out to be the thing that holds when everything modern falls over.
11 hours and 30 minutes. I want to describe a phenomenon that has now been reported in at least 14 cities, because it is the sort of thing that will be misreported if we do not describe it accurately. In multiple metropolitan areas, residents have organized what are being called perimeter runs. Volunteers with personal vehicles are collecting requests through neighborhood text groups and social platforms, picking up medication from pharmacies that are still open, and delivering to homes with no contact. There is no central organization, there is no agency behind it. In Denver, Colorado, one such network is reported to have completed over 400 deliveries in 6 hours. In Nashville, Tennessee, a similar network has focused specifically on insulin, which is the medication most likely to kill someone within days of a supply interruption.
Insulin, that is the one I have been dreading, and I am glad somebody in Nashville got there before we did. There are roughly 8.5 million Americans who depend on insulin, and a meaningful number of them have less than a week on hand at any given time. The same is true of dialysis, and dialysis you cannot deliver to a porch. There are about 500,000 Americans on dialysis, and every one of them needs a functioning clinic 3 times a week, and many of those clinics are closed tonight. Those people are not going to appear in the outbreak numbers either. I want them counted somewhere, and this broadcast is the only place I can count them.
A statement has just been released by the Office of the Surgeon General, and I am going to read it in full. To the American people, in the coming hours, you will be asked to make decisions without adequate information and without help from institutions you have relied upon. I will not insult you by pretending otherwise. Here is what we know to be true. This virus does not survive long outside. It spreads in enclosed spaces. Distance and open air are protective. Existing vaccine is effective, but supply is severely limited and is being directed to those whose work protects the most lives. Most of you will not be able to obtain it. What most of you can do is stay apart, stay outdoors when you can, ventilate the rooms you occupy, and look after the people within reach of your own hands. That is not a small thing. Historically, in every epidemic humanity has faced, ordinary people acting locally have saved more lives than any national program. That will be true tonight. We will publish everything we learn as we learn it. We will not withhold bad news. Take care of each other.
We will not withhold bad news. I have covered enough of these to know how rare that sentence is in an official statement, and I want to give credit where it is due. Every institution in this country tonight is making a choice between managing the public and trusting the public, and so far at 11.5 hours, the ones we have heard from have trusted the public. That is not nothing. That is the difference between a country that gets through this and a country that comes apart.
12 hours, halfway through the first day. Let me give the complete picture. Confirmed cases, 1,140. Deaths, 298. Presumptive cases, an estimated 17,500. 47 states, all but Hawaii, Vermont, and Alaska, and I would caution that absence of confirmation is not absence of virus. Healthcare worker infections, 281. Household contact infections, 640. Hospitals not accepting patients, 147. Power outages, 1,400,000 customers. And the number I watch most closely, community clusters with no traceable link to any known case, now 83 across 24 states.
12 hours. This morning, 12 hours ago, the biggest story in this country was something I genuinely cannot remember. I have been trying for the last few minutes to recall what we were going to lead with tonight, and I cannot do it. 12 hours ago, people were annoyed about traffic. Somebody was worried about a meeting. Somebody bought a birthday cake for tomorrow. All of that was this morning, and all of it is gone, and none of it is coming back in the shape it was. I think everyone watching has had a moment in the last few hours of looking at some ordinary object in their house and understanding that the world it belonged to ended while they were asleep.
I want to address that directly because I think there is a practical component to it that is not merely emotional. There is a known phenomenon in disaster response called normalcy bias, in which people fail to act because they cannot accept that the situation has changed. It kills people in fires, in floods, and in evacuations, consistently and predictably. The counterweight to it is exactly what Sarah just described, that moment of looking at an ordinary object and understanding. If you have had that moment tonight, it is unpleasant, but it is the correct response and it will make your next decisions better. If you have not had it yet, I would encourage you to stop and have it. Look around the room you are in and accept fully that the circumstances have changed. Then decide what you are going to do next. People who make that adjustment early survive at markedly higher rates than people who make it late.
We have a message I want to read that comes from an unexpected direction. This is from a person who identifies as a veterinarian in Bozeman, Montana. Nobody is going to think of us, so I am writing. There are veterinary clinics in every town in this country, and we have rabies vaccine, not the human formulation, but we have the animal one, and we have immune globulin protocols, and more than that, we have autoclaves, oxygen concentrators, 4 fluids, monitors, and surgical space. My clinic has 4 exam rooms sitting empty right now, while the hospital 8 miles away is turning people away in the parking lot. I called them 2 hours ago and offered everything I have, including myself. They said yes. There are 2 human patients in my clinic right now on my equipment. Tell every vet watching to make that call. We are the largest unused medical resource in America tonight.
That is operationally significant, and I want to quantify it. There are approximately 32,000 veterinary practices in the United States. Collectively, they hold a substantial fraction of the nation's non-hospital oxygen delivery equipment, intravenous fluid stock, monitoring equipment, and, critically, they hold a very large quantity of rabies vaccine, because rabies vaccination is a routine and legally mandated part of veterinary practice. The animal formulation is not approved for human use, and I want to be extremely clear that I am not advising anyone to self-administer anything. But the infrastructure that viewer describes is real. It is distributed into every small town in America, and it is currently idle. If there is a single systemic idea to come out of this broadcast, it may be that one.
We are 12 hours and 40 minutes in, and I want to spend a few minutes on something we have not discussed at all tonight, which is what is happening in places where there is no hospital at all. Roughly 60 million Americans live in rural areas. In many of those counties, the nearest emergency department was already an hour away before tonight. There are counties in Nebraska, in West Texas, in eastern Oregon, in Appalachia, where there is 1 clinic and 1 physician assistant and a volunteer ambulance service that runs on people who have day jobs. I have been assuming all night that those places would be the worst hit, and the messages we are receiving suggest something more complicated.
The data supports the complication. Case density is markedly lower in low population density counties, and the reason is straightforward and is the same reason Dr. Whitfield gave us. This virus requires enclosed shared air. A county with 4 people per square mile does not generate the indoor congregation events that drive transmission. There is no packed transit, no dense workplace, no crowded emergency department. What we are observing is that rural America is, at hour 12, meaningfully safer than urban America in terms of infection risk, while being meaningfully more vulnerable in terms of treatment access if infection occurs. Those 2 facts partially cancel. It is one of the few structural pieces of good news available tonight.
And it changes advice. If you are in a rural place tonight, staying there is almost certainly the right call. Do not drive to a city to be near a hospital. The hospital is full, and the drive will put you in gas stations and rest stops. This message came in from Valentine, Nebraska. There are 800 of us here. We have 1 clinic. the physician assistant called a town meeting on the radio and said the plan is nobody comes in and nobody goes out for 2 weeks, and everybody agreed inside of an hour. The grocery is going to run deliveries. The school is opening as a place for anyone alone. Somebody with a plane is going to fly medicine in from Rapid City. We figured it out before lunch. Tell the cities it can be done.
13 hours, the numbers. Confirmed cases, 1,388. Deaths, 371. Presumptive, an estimated 21,000. 48 states, Hawaii having reported its first confirmed case 40 minutes ago. Aviation linked, a passenger who arrived from Los Angeles. Internationally, confirmed cases now 462 across 31 countries. Power, 1,600,000 customers dark. Water, and this is new and it is serious. 4 municipal water systems, serving a combined population of approximately 310,000, have issued boil water advisories due to loss of treatment capacity. Boil water advisories require electricity or gas to comply with. 2 of those 4 communities do not have power.
So there are people tonight who have been told to boil water and cannot boil water. I want to give the practical alternatives because somebody needs to say them out loud. If you cannot boil, unscented household bleach at 8 drops per gallon, mixed and left to stand for 30 minutes, will disinfect clear water. Water heaters in most homes hold between 40 and 80 gallons of already treated water, and there is a drain valve at the bottom. Toilet tanks, the upper tank, not the bowl, hold clean water. Melted ice from a freezer is treated water. If you are in one of those 4 communities tonight, you have more clean water in your house than you think you do, and I would rather say that on television than have somebody drink from a tap because nobody told them the alternatives.
The federal response has now formally escalated. The President has invoked the Defense Production Act with respect to pharmaceutical manufacturing, medical equipment, and, notably, generator fuel distribution. A national emergency declaration is in effect in all 50 states, which unlocks federal funding mechanisms and, more importantly, allows for the interstate movement of medical licensure, meaning a physician licensed in Ohio can practice in Missouri as of this hour without any administrative process. That last provision sounds like paperwork, and it is not. It means that if you are a retired physician, a nurse whose license lapsed, a paramedic who left the field, the legal barrier to you walking into a facility tonight and being useful has just been removed.
We have already seen the response to that, and the announcement is only about 40 minutes old. Hospitals in 6 states are reporting people showing up at loading docks with expired credentials in their hands. A hospital in Columbus, Ohio, told an affiliate that 11 retired nurses arrived in the space of an hour, and the youngest was 61. 61 years old, retired, walking into an airborne rabies outbreak because a legal barrier came down and somebody needed help. I keep trying to find a way to talk about that which does not sound like a speech, and I cannot, so I will just report it as a fact. 11 people, Columbus, in an hour.
13 hours and 30 minutes, and I need to report something that is going to be difficult and that I am going to state plainly rather than soften. The first documented instance of a hospital being overwhelmed to the point of a security failure occurred approximately 50 minutes ago in Memphis, Tennessee. A crowd estimated at several hundred people gathered at a facility that had ceased intake. There was a breach of the emergency department entrance. 2 staff members were injured. The facility was evacuated of remaining ambulatory patients and is now closed entirely. I report this because it will circulate regardless, and because the lesson in it is one people need. That crowd did not accomplish anything. The hospital had nothing to give. Everyone who entered that building was exposed. That was not a failure of policing. It was a failure of information.
And I want to say something about the people in that crowd because it will be very easy in the next few hours for the story of tonight to become a story about them. Those were not rioters. Those were people carrying family members. Somebody in that crowd was holding a child. When a person has someone dying in their arms and a building in front of them with the word hospital on it, they will go through the door, and every single one of us would. The lesson is not that people are dangerous. The lesson is that the closed doors need to be explained before people arrive at them, and where hospitals have posted staff outside to explain in Tulsa, in Wichita, in Des Moines, that has not happened once.
14 hours. Let me give the complete state of the nation as best we can verify it. Confirmed cases, 1,712. Deaths, 486. Presumptive cases, an estimated 26,000. All 50 states now report at least one confirmed or presumptive case, Vermont and Alaska having reported in the last 20 minutes. Healthcare worker infections, 347. Hospitals not accepting patients, 181. Power outages, 1,900,000 customers. Cell site outages, 22% in the Central Corridor. Municipal water systems degraded, 9. And the number that describes the shape of the future, community clusters with no traceable origin, 112 across 31 states.
14 hours. It is deep night now across most of this country, and I want to acknowledge what that means, because darkness changes things. Everything is harder at 3 in the morning. Every fear is larger. If you are awake right now and frightened and alone, that is not weakness, and it is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is 3 in the morning during the worst night of your life. Millions of people are awake with you. There is a woman in Duluth awake. There is a girl in Columbia, Missouri, sitting outside a bedroom door awake. There are 4 people in a control room in Arkansas awake. There is a man in Salt Lake City with a full pantry awake. You are in the largest company anyone has ever been in.
I want to give a projection now, and I want to preface it heavily. Modeling groups at 3 universities and at the CDC have released preliminary estimates in the last hour, and these estimates carry uncertainty ranges so wide as to be nearly useless, but I believe the public is better served by seeing them than by not. The central estimate for total infections in the United States over the full course of this outbreak, assuming current behavior and assuming vaccine supply expands on the announced timeline, is between 2 and 9 million people. The corresponding mortality estimate, given the case fatality characteristics of lyssavirus infection, is between 1.6 and 7.5 million deaths. I want to be honest that the difference between those two ends of the range is almost entirely determined by what happens in the next 48 hours, and specifically by whether people stay apart.
Between 1.6 and 7.5 million, I am not going to pretend I can absorb that, but I want to take David's second sentence and make it the loudest thing we have said tonight, because it is the only sentence on this program that anybody watching can actually do something about. The difference between the low number and the high number is roughly 6 million people, and that 6 million is not decided in a laboratory or in a capital. It is decided by whether the people watching this stay out of enclosed rooms with each other for the next 2 days. 6 million lives sitting in the hands of ordinary people making a boring, uncomfortable, lonely choice in their own homes. That is the whole game. That is everything.
I want to reinforce that with the epidemiology, because it is not a rhetorical claim. The reproduction number for this variant is currently estimated between 3.1 and 4.4 in unmitigated indoor conditions. Under conditions of household isolation and outdoor-only contact, the modeled reproduction number falls below 1. Below 1, an epidemic dies. It does not slow, it ends. There is no ambiguity in that mathematics, and it has been true of every epidemic in history. The entire question tonight, the only question, is whether a nation of 340 million people will individually choose, without enforcement, to hold a line that no government could hold for them.
14 hours and 30 minutes, we have a viewer message that I think belongs right here, right after that. This is from Boise, Idaho. I am a bus driver and my route is dead and my depot is closed. So I took my own car and I have been driving nurses to and from a hospital for 9 hours because none of them want to take the bus and a lot of them are too tired to drive. I have windows down and everybody wears a mask and nobody talks. I have made 31 trips. One of them fell asleep in my back seat and I let her sleep for 20 minutes in the parking lot before I woke her up. That is the most useful thing I have ever done, and I am 54.
There is a category in emergency management called spontaneous volunteerism, and the professional literature on it is historically somewhat negative. The consensus view has been that spontaneous volunteers create coordination burdens and that formal response systems function better without them. I have read that literature. I taught from a version of it once. Tonight, in real time, on this broadcast, I am watching that consensus fall apart. The formal systems are at capacity or beyond it in most of this country. What is holding, where anything is holding, is 31 car trips in Boise and 400 deliveries in Denver and a veterinary clinic in Bozeman and a town meeting in Valentine, Nebraska. The literature was wrong. I want that on the record from someone who believed it.
15 hours. Before we take the numbers again, I want to read something that came in from a hospice nurse in Charleston, South Carolina, because we have talked a great deal tonight about saving people and not enough about the other work. I do end-of-life care, and that is all I have ever done. Tonight I am useful in a way I have never been. Nobody in a hospital has time to sit with a dying person right now, so a few of us have been going where we are called and just sitting. I have sat with 6 people tonight. I hold a hand through a glove. I say their name. I tell them who loves them. 2 of them were awake enough to know I was there. 4 were not, and I said it anyway. If your person is dying tonight and you cannot be there, know that there are people like me, and we are saying your name to them.
15 hours. Confirmed cases, 2,190. Deaths, 642. Presumptive cases, an estimated 32,000. Healthcare worker infections, 409. Hospitals not accepting patients, 206. Power outages, 2,200,000 customers, with the affected footprint now extending into Iowa, Nebraska, Mississippi, and Alabama. Water systems degraded, 14. Internationally, 611 confirmed cases across 36 countries, with the first sustained local transmission outside North America now confirmed in Frankfurt, Germany, and in Osaka, Japan, both of which represent transmission chains that no longer trace to an American traveler.
Sustained local transmission in Germany and Japan means this is no longer an American event, and I think we should say that plainly. Whatever happens here is going to happen in some form everywhere. And the countries watching us tonight are, at this hour, receiving the most valuable thing we can give them, which is a 14-hour head start and a complete and honest record of what we got right and what we got wrong. I hope somebody in a Ministry of Health in Seoul or Lagos or Buenos Aires is watching this broadcast with a notepad. The single most important thing you can learn from us is this: it moves indoors. Close the indoor spaces before you have a single case, not after. We closed ours at hour 9. 9 hours cost us a great deal.
15 hours and 30 minutes. I want to update the vaccine picture because there has been significant movement and it is cautiously positive. 4 major manufacturers located in India, France, Germany, and the United States have announced converted production. The Indian manufacturer alone has stated a target of 4 million doses within 21 days, which would exceed a quarter of normal global annual output. The Defense Production Act invocation has directed 3 additional American facilities, which normally produce unrelated vaccines, to convert. Combined announced capacity, if all commitments are met, and I stress the conditional, is approximately 11 million doses within 30 days and 40 million within 90 days.
30 days, and a person infected tonight has at most 4 days. So I want to be honest about what those numbers mean and what they do not mean. They do not mean help is coming for the people who are sick tonight. Nothing is coming for them in time. What those numbers mean is that there is a wall being built, and if enough people hold still long enough, the wall gets there before the fire does. That is the whole strategy of this. Every hour that people stay apart is an hour the manufacturers get, and every dose that comes off a line in 30 days is a person who is alive in 31 days. The people staying home tonight are not saving themselves. They are buying time for strangers they will never meet. I want them to understand that is what they are doing because it is the most generous thing a person can do, and most of them do not know they are doing it.
16 hours. Sunrise is beginning on the East Coast, and I want to note that for a specific reason beyond the symbolism, Dr. Whitfield told us on this program that the virus degrades faster in direct sunlight and in air above 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Much of the eastern and southern United States will exceed that temperature within the next 6 hours. That is not a solution, and it does not make outdoor air safe by some new mechanism, because outdoor air was already the safer option. But it does mean that as this day warms, the marginal risk of everything people do outside drops further, and the marginal advantage of staying out of buildings grows. If you have been sitting inside all night out of fear, and you have a yard, a porch, a stoop, a field, the sun coming up is an invitation. Take it. 16 hours and 10 minutes. I want to give you a piece of information that has just been verified by 3 independent sources, because it changes one of the numbers we have been carrying all night. The Centers for Disease Control has revised the estimated incubation window. The figure we have been using, and the figure I have repeated on this broadcast at least a dozen times, was 36 to 72 hours from exposure to first symptom. The revised figure, based on a cohort of 411 cases with a known and precisely timed exposure event, is 52 to 96 hours, with a median of 68. That is a longer window than we thought. It is worse in one specific way and better in 3. Worse, because a longer window means more days of a person walking around unaware, which means the true infected population tonight is larger than our presumptive count. Better, because a longer window means the wave we are about to see was seeded before the shutdown, not after it. And better, because it gives the vaccine effort a slightly wider target. And better, because it means that a person exposed at hour 1 is not, as we feared, already beyond help at hour 16.
I want to translate that because I think a lot of people just heard a number change and felt their stomach drop. Here is what it means for you in a kitchen at 16 hours in. If you were in a crowded indoor place 2 days ago and you have been sitting there since watching a clock and waiting to feel something, the clock you were watching was wrong. You have more time than you thought, not unlimited and not a promise, but more. And if you have not yet gotten to a place where vaccine is being given and you had written yourself off, do not write yourself off. Dr. Whitfield told us hours ago that post-exposure treatment works, and it works better the earlier it happens, and it is not a switch that flips at hour 36. Go. Call the number for your county. Stand in the line. The longer window is the only piece of good news the biology has handed us tonight, and I want every person it applies to actually use it.
16 hours and 25 minutes, and we have Dr. Avery Whitfield back with us. Doctor, thank you for staying. I want to ask about that revision specifically because a longer incubation window is not usually a headline that virologists deliver with any enthusiasm, and you sounded, when we spoke off air, close to enthusiastic.
I was, and I will explain why, and then I will explain why the enthusiasm is limited. A longer incubation period is, in the crude arithmetic of an outbreak, a bad thing because it lengthens the silent transmission period. That is true. But there is a second and less obvious effect. This virus, at its core, is still a rabies virus. And rabies is unusual among human pathogens in that we have a post-exposure treatment that is nearly 100% effective when given inside the window. Every hour you add to that window is an hour in which a treatment we already have, that already exists, that is already in freezers in every county in this country, still works. The revision means the pool of people we can still save is substantially larger than the pool we thought we had at midnight. I have spent the last 2 hours on calls with state health officers telling them to stop triaging by exposure date. They were turning people away who were still savable.
Doctor, how many people are we talking about? Can you put a number on the population that just moved from the unsavable column to the savable column?
I can give you a range, and I will be honest that the uncertainty on it is enormous. If the presumptive infected population is somewhere around 32,000, and if the exposure timing distribution looks anything like the 411 case cohort, then the number of people who are currently past the old window but inside the new one is somewhere between 9,000 and 14,000. Those are people who were told, in some cases by me and by people I trained, that there was nothing to be done. There is something to be done. It requires that they physically reach a treatment site and that the site has product. Both of those are hard tonight, but the biology is not the obstacle anymore for those 9,000 to 14,000 people. Logistics is, and logistics is a problem human beings are actually good at solving.
Doctor, before you go, I want to ask you something that is not a science question and you can decline it. We have been on the air with you for most of a night. You have told us bad news 4 times and good news twice, and you have not once, that I have noticed, said anything about yourself. Are you all right? And is there anything you want to say to the people out there who are doing your job in a worse building than yours?
I have not slept, and I have a daughter in Portland who I have not been able to reach since about hour 6, and the line is down and not, I think, anything worse than that. As for the other thing, I would say this to the people in the labs and the county health offices and the hospital basements. You are going to make errors tonight. You are working past the point where a human being makes good decisions, and you will get something wrong, and somebody will die who might not have. I want you to hear from someone senior enough that it counts. That error is not yours. It belongs to the situation. Log it, tell the next shift, and keep working. The single worst thing you can do right now is stop working in order to feel appropriately terrible about a mistake. Feel terrible in a month. We will all have time then.
Dr. Avery Whitfield, we are grateful. Please get word to Portland when you can, and if anyone in Portland is watching and hears this, the doctor's daughter is in the southeast of that city, and a phone line is out, and that is all we know and all we are going to say. 17 hours, numbers, confirmed cases, 2,488, deaths, 731, presumptive cases, an estimated 35,000, healthcare worker infections, 452, hospitals not accepting new patients, 219, power outages, 2,400,000 customers, water systems degraded, 16, international confirmed cases, 704 across 39 countries, with new sustained local transmission reported in Toronto, Canada, and in Manchester, England.
731. I have watched that number climb all night, and I have said it out loud maybe 15 times, and I want to do something with it now that I have not done yet. I want to say that 731 is not a curve. A curve is what it looks like on a screen. 731 is a woman in Sacramento who taught 3rd grade for 19 years, and a man in Little Rock who ran a hardware store his father opened, and a 19-year-old in Columbus who had been at college for 11 months. I know those 3 because their families wrote to us. I do not know the other 728, and neither do you, and the only honest thing I can tell you is that each of them was the center of the world to somebody, and that somebody is awake right now at 17 hours in a house that is too quiet.
17 hours and 15 minutes. I want to walk through the infrastructure picture in some detail because there have been 3 developments in the last hour, and taken together they represent the most serious cascade risk we have faced tonight. First, the power situation. The 2.4 million customer figure understates the problem because the failures are no longer weather-driven or demand-driven. They are staffing-driven. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation has confirmed that 11 balancing authorities are operating below minimum qualified staffing, and that 4 generating stations, 3 in the Ohio Valley and 1 in central Georgia, have been placed in what is called a controlled shutdown because the control room could not be crewed. A controlled shutdown is the good outcome. It is what happens when people leave in an orderly way. The alternative is worse.
And that is the sentence I want people at home to sit with, because I do not think most of us have ever thought about it. The lights in your house are on because a specific person is sitting in a specific room right now watching a specific screen. It is not automatic. It is not a machine that runs itself. It is somebody who drove in tonight, past all of this, and sat down at a desk. There is a control room in the Ohio Valley where somebody made the decision to walk out, and I am not going to say one word against that person, because that person may have children at home and may have been the last one there. And there is a control room somewhere else tonight where somebody made the opposite decision and your refrigerator is running because of it.
Second development, fuel. The Colonial Pipeline System, which carries roughly 45% of the fuel consumed on the East Coast, has reduced throughput to approximately 60% of normal, again for staffing rather than mechanical reasons. Combined with panic purchasing, this has produced fuel unavailability at an estimated 31% of retail stations from Virginia south to Florida. Third development, and this is the one that concerns me most, water. 16 degraded systems is the confirmed figure, but the failure mode is not contamination, it is chemistry. Municipal water treatment requires the continuous delivery of chlorine and other treatment chemicals by truck, and it requires a licensed operator on site. Both supply chains are thin tonight. A degraded system is one where the operator has reduced treatment. Boil water notices are now in effect for portions of Memphis, Tennessee, Shreveport, Louisiana, and Toledo, Ohio.
Boil water. In the middle of everything else, boil water. And I want to say the practical thing because someone in Memphis needs it. If you are under a boil notice, a rolling boil for 1 full minute is enough, 3 minutes if you are up in high elevation, and then let it cool and put it in a clean container. If your power is out and you cannot boil, you can use plain unscented household bleach, 8 drops per gallon, stir it and wait 30 minutes. And if you have a neighbor who is elderly or who cannot lift a pot, this is a thing you can do from a doorway. Boil an extra gallon, leave it on a porch. Text that you left it. That is a complete act of decency, and it costs you 6 minutes.
17 hours and 40 minutes. We have an official statement I want to read in full because it is the first thing issued tonight by the federal government that contains an admission rather than a reassurance. This is from the Office of the Secretary of Homeland Security, released 18 minutes ago. The department acknowledges that the national response to this event has been slower than the event itself. Guidance issued at hour 4 regarding droplet transmission was incorrect and was based on the best information then available. It was superseded at hour 9. We estimate that the delay between those two guidance documents contributed to a substantial number of infections that would otherwise have been prevented. The department will not attempt to characterize that number tonight. We state it plainly so that state and local officials and the governments of other nations understand that the single highest value action available is the immediate closure of shared indoor spaces undertaken before the appearance of local cases and not after. We were slow. Do not be slow.
I have been in this work a long time, and I have never heard a government say we were slow. Do not be slow. That is not a press release. That is somebody at 3 in the morning deciding that the record matters more than the reputation. And I hope whoever wrote that keeps their job, and I suspect they will not, and I want them to know that it was the right thing and that it will save people in countries none of us have thought about tonight.
18 hours. And with 18 hours comes the first genuinely encouraging data set of this broadcast, so I want to present it carefully and with its limitations attached. 6 metropolitan areas implemented full indoor closure orders before recording a single confirmed local case. Those are Portland, Oregon, Salt Lake City, Utah, Madison, Wisconsin, Burlington, Vermont, Anchorage, Alaska, and Honolulu, Hawaii. In those 6 metros, combined population approximately 5.1 million, total confirmed cases at 18 hours stands at 19. 19. In 6 metros of comparable combined population that closed after their first confirmed case, the figure is 406. That is a difference of more than 20 to 1. The limitations are real. Different population densities, different travel patterns, different testing rates. But a 20 to 1 difference does not come from testing rates. Closing early works. It is the only intervention tonight with an effect size that large.
19. 5 million people and 19 cases, and the entire difference is that somebody in 6 city halls made an unpopular decision on incomplete information and took the phone calls afterward. I want to name what that cost those people because it is not free. The mayor of Madison closed a city that had 0 cases and got called hysterical for about 6 hours, and I would bet money there were editorials being written. And now there are, I do not know, 500 people alive in Madison who will never know that a decision made in a room they have never seen is the reason they get to be tired and bored tomorrow instead of dead. That is what public service actually looks like, and it almost never gets a thank you because the disaster you prevent leaves no evidence.
18 hours and 15 minutes. Colonel Reese Marchetti is back with us from Northern Command. Colonel, the last time we spoke, you described the distribution effort as constrained by cold chain and by driver availability. What has changed in 6 hours?
3 things, and I will give them to you in order of importance. First, the driver problem is solved, and it was not solved by us. We put out a request through state emergency management for anyone holding a commercial license willing to run refrigerated freight. We asked for 400 drivers. We have received, as of the last count I was given 40 minutes ago, 6,100 applications. Second, cold chain. We have converted 11 military and civilian aircraft to refrigerated cargo configuration, and we are flying vaccine directly into regional airports rather than routing through distribution centers, which cuts about 9 hours out of every delivery. Third, and this is the one I want to be careful about, we have made the decision to distribute product without waiting for allocation formulas. The formula process was taking 6 hours per state. We stopped doing it. Product now goes to whoever asks first and can receive it. That will produce inequities. I have accepted them. Getting 80% of it to the right place tonight beats getting 100% to the right place tomorrow.
Colonel, 6,100 applications for 400 positions. What are you doing with the other 5,700?
We are taking all of them, every single one. We have stood up an ad hoc civilian transport auxiliary in about 4 hours, and there is no legal framework for it that I am fully confident in. And I have told my legal officer to write the memo and hand it to me in a month. Those drivers are moving vaccine, they are moving oxygen concentrators, they are moving generator fuel to hospitals in the Ohio Valley, and as of about 90 minutes ago, 4 of them are moving chlorine to a water plant outside Memphis, Tennessee, on the theory that a soldier does not know how to unload chlorine and a freight driver does.
Colonel, I have to ask you the same thing I asked the doctor. You have been up as long as we have. What does it look like where you are?
It looks like a room with too many people in it, and every one of them is wearing a mask, and nobody has eaten. I will tell you the thing I did not expect. I have been in this uniform for 26 years, and I have deployed 4 times. And I expected, honestly, that a domestic event of this kind would break down into people protecting their own. It has not at the scale I was braced for. There is looting in some places, and there is hoarding everywhere, and there are people behaving badly, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. But the dominant behavior I am observing, from a position where I can see the whole country at once, is people giving things away. I did not have that in my planning assumptions. I have been wrong about my own countrymen for 26 years, and I am glad about it.
Colonel Reese Marchetti, thank you. 19 hours, numbers, confirmed cases, 2,891. Deaths, 847. Presumptive cases, an estimated 37,000. Healthcare worker infections, 488. Hospitals not accepting new patients, 226. Power outages, 2,500,000 customers. Water systems degraded, 17. International confirmed cases, 831 across 42 countries. And I want to note something about the shape of those numbers rather than their size. The rate of increase in confirmed cases between hour 17 and hour 19 was 14%. Between hour 15 and hour 17, it was 19%. Between hour 13 and hour 15, it was 26%. The number is still climbing. The rate at which it climbs is falling, and it has fallen for 3 consecutive intervals.
Say that again, David. Say it slower, because I do not think people caught it.
The curve is bending. It is not falling. More people are sick at 19 hours than at 18 hours, and more will be sick at 20. But each 2-hour interval is adding proportionally fewer than the interval before it, 3 times in a row. And that is the first thing in this entire broadcast that I am willing to call a trend rather than a fluctuation. I want to attach every caution to it. Reporting is degraded, some jurisdictions have stopped submitting, and a bend can unbend. But the mechanism is not mysterious. 10 hours ago, this country stopped going indoors together. The incubation window is 52 to 96 hours. What we are seeing at hour 19 is not the effect of the closures. It is too early for that. What we are seeing is the effect of people who changed behavior on their own before anybody told them to in the first 6 hours of this thing, because they were listening to a radio or a television and they were afraid and they decided to stay home.
So the bend in that curve is people. That is what you are telling me. That is not a policy, and that is not a drug, and that is not the Army. That is a few million individual human beings, each one alone in a house, each one deciding on their own that they would rather be bored and scared at home than take a chance, and none of them knowing that anyone else was deciding the same thing at the same moment. And the sum of all those small private acts of caution is showing up at hour 19 as a number that is climbing slower. I have been doing this job for a long time, and that is the single most moving thing I have ever had explained to me on air.
19 hours and 30 minutes. Viewer messages, and we have a large volume, so I'm going to read 4 in sequence. This one is from Duluth, Minnesota. I am a radio operator, amateur, licensed since I was 15. When the cell towers went down in our county, I got on the air, and I have been relaying messages between families for 11 hours. I have passed 409 messages. Most of them are the same message, which is, I am alive. Are you alive? I have had to tell 3 people that the person they were asking about is not alive. I did not know how to do that, and I am not sure I did it right, but I did it. From Amarillo, Texas. My wife is a dialysis patient, and her center closed. A nurse from that center came to our house with a portable machine and did her treatment in our living room and would not take money. I do not know that nurse's last name.
From Providence, Rhode Island. I am 14, my mom is a nurse, and she has not come home in 2 days, and she calls me every 4 hours. I have been taking care of my brother, who is 6. I made him macaroni, and I made him take a bath, and I have not let him watch the news. He thinks it is a snow day. I am doing a good job, I think, but I would like it if somebody said so. Somebody is saying so. I am saying so. You are doing a good job. You are doing a better job than most adults are doing tonight, and your mother knows it, and that is why she can do what she is doing, because she is not worrying about you. Keep him off the news. Make him macaroni again tomorrow. And when your mom comes home, and she is going to come home, let her sleep before you tell her anything.
20 hours, numbers, and then a longer segment on where this ends, because I think we are now far enough into this to talk about the end of it responsibly. Confirmed cases, 3,240. Deaths, 961. Presumptive cases, an estimated 38,500. Healthcare worker infections, 512. Hospitals not accepting new patients, 229, which is an increase of 3, the smallest 2-hour increase of the night. Power outages, 2,400,000 customers, which is a decrease of 100,000 and the first decrease recorded tonight. Water systems degraded, 17 unchanged. International confirmed cases, 960 across 44 countries.
A decrease. 100,000 houses that had their power come back on between hour 18 and hour 20. I want to know who did that. I want to know their names, and I am never going to. Somewhere there is a line crew that went out in the dark, in masks, in a bucket truck, to a substation that nobody was staffing, and they got 100,000 refrigerators running again, and 100,000 oxygen concentrators, and 100,000 kitchen lights, and then presumably they drove to the next one. That is the whole story of tonight in one number going down by 100,000.
20 hours and 10 minutes, and here is the modeling picture, which I have been reluctant to present until it's stabilized. 4 independent groups have now published projections using the revised incubation window and the observed behavioral change. I am going to give you the range rather than a point estimate, because a point estimate at hour 20 would be false precision. The projections converge on a total mortality figure for the United States over the full course of this outbreak of between 19,000 and 47,000, with the mid-range clustering near 26,000. The equivalent projection produced at hour 8, before the closures and before the incubation revision, was between 400,000 and 1.1 million. The distance between those two ranges is the value of the last 12 hours.
26,000 people, and I need to hold both of those things at once, and I am going to ask you to hold them too. 26,000 is a catastrophe. It is more people than live in a lot of the towns we have named tonight. Every one of those 26,000 has a house with their coat still hanging in it, and also 26,000 instead of 1 million means that somewhere around 970,000 people are going to wake up next year and never know that they were on a list once. They will be irritated about traffic. They will forget to call their mother. They will be completely ordinary. That is what we bought tonight. 970,000 ordinary lives, purchased with a shutdown and a lot of tired people and a curve that bent.
21 hours. There are 3 developments in the last hour. First, the World Health Organization has formally designated this event and issued unified international guidance, and I want to read the operative paragraph. Member states are advised that the primary and most effective intervention is the immediate suspension of shared indoor gatherings implemented in advance of confirmed local transmission. Member states are further advised that existing rabies post-exposure prophylaxis remains effective against this strain and that stockpiles should be released without cost or documentation requirement. The organization notes that the United States, Canada, and the Republic of Korea have made their full case and genomic data available without restriction within 20 hours of index detection and considers this the single largest factor in the international response capability that now exists.
Without restriction, within 20 hours, somebody made that call. Somebody in a room decided to hand every genome and every case record to every country on Earth, including countries we do not get along with, for free, immediately, no conditions. That is going to save more people than anything the Army did tonight, and it took about 4 minutes and a signature.
Second development, Seoul, Republic of Korea, implemented full indoor closure at hour 11 of this event, which is 9 hours after index detection in this country and before a single confirmed Korean case. Korea has, at hour 21, 4 confirmed cases, all in travelers, all isolated, 0 onward transmission. Third development, and it is the one I want to end this segment on, the Indian manufacturer that announced converted production has revised its target upward. The revised figure is 9 million doses within 21 days, and the company has stated that the doses will be distributed at cost through the World Health Organization allocation mechanism with priority to countries lacking domestic production capacity. 9 million doses at cost. I have covered pharmaceutical policy for a long time, and I did not expect to say that sentence.
21 hours and 20 minutes, and the sun is fully up across most of this country now. And I want to describe something that our people have been sending in from all over because it is strange and I think it is important. The streets are not empty, they are full, not with traffic, with people outside, front yards, parking lots, rooftops, ball fields, church steps. Somebody in Tulsa wrote that the entire block brought chairs out and set them up about 15 feet apart, and everybody just sat there, in the sun, in their own yard, in sight of each other, not talking much. That is what a country looks like when it has been told that the indoors is dangerous and it still needs to see other faces. We invented a new way to be together in about 19 hours.
22 hours. Numbers. Confirmed cases, 3,581. Deaths, 1,140. Presumptive cases, an estimated 39,200. Healthcare worker infections, 531. Hospitals not accepting new patients, 224, a decrease of 5. Power outages, 2,100,000 customers, a decrease of 300,000. Water systems degraded, 15, a decrease of 2, with the Memphis, Tennessee boil water notice lifted 40 minutes ago. International confirmed cases, 1,080 across 46 countries. The rate of increase in confirmed cases between hour 20 and hour 22 was 10%, down from 14 and from 19 and from 26, 4 consecutive intervals of deceleration.
1,140, that is the number I am going to remember out of this night, not because it is the final number, because it is not. It is going to keep climbing for days, and by the time this is truly over, it will be 20-something thousand. But 1,140 is the number at the hour when we finally knew it was going to be survivable, and I think that is a thing people should be able to point at. Those 1,140 people died in the part where nobody knew. They did not get the benefit of a single thing we learned tonight. Everything that is going to save the next person was paid for by them.
22 hours and 15 minutes. Viewer messages from Erie, Pennsylvania. The power came back at 6 this morning. I cried in my kitchen. My insulin is fine. That is the whole message. From Wichita, Kansas. I own a movie theater. I closed it at hour 5 before anybody told me to because I heard a doctor on your program say indoors and crowds. I have 140 seats, and on a normal night, there would have been maybe 60 people in there. I have been sick about the money all night, and I am not sick about it anymore. From Oakland, California. My father died at 4 this morning at Highland Hospital. He was 78. A respiratory therapist held a phone to his ear so I could talk to him, and I do not think he could hear me, but the therapist told me he could, and I have decided to believe it.
I have decided to believe it. That is a sentence I would like everyone to keep. From Norfolk, Virginia. I am a chaplain, and I have done 19 of these tonight, 19 phone calls where I hold a phone to somebody's ear. I want the families to know something. In every single one of them, the last thing the person heard was a voice that loved them. Everyone, 19 for 19. If your person went tonight in a hospital in this country, there is a very good chance somebody did this for them, and you should assume it happened. 19 for 19. That is the report from Norfolk, and I am going to take it as the report from everywhere.
23 hours. I want to give you a status on the 6 cities that closed early, because we have now got a clean 23-hour comparison, and it is the piece of evidence that is going to be taught. Portland, Oregon, 3 cases. Salt Lake City, Utah, 2 cases. Madison, Wisconsin, 1 case. Burlington, Vermont, 0 cases. Anchorage, Alaska, 0 cases. Honolulu, Hawaii, 4 cases. 10 cases in 5.1 million people at 23 hours into a nationally distributed airborne outbreak. The mechanism is not complicated, and it is not medical. Those cities took a specific, unpopular, expensive action on the basis of a warning rather than on the basis of a body, and the difference between acting on a warning and acting on a body is, in this event, approximately a factor of 20 in human lives.
And I want to say the thing about Portland because I have been waiting all night to say it. Dr. Whitfield told us at hour 16 that there was a daughter in southeast Portland and a phone line down. We got a message about 90 minutes ago from a neighbor on that street. The daughter is fine. The line is a physical break on a pole from a tree that came down, and there is a crew on it, the doctor has been told. And I want to be honest that I am aware this is one person out of 330 million and that there are 1,000 families tonight who are not getting this message. But the person who spent this entire night telling us the truth about a virus, including the parts that made us afraid, gets to know that the kid is okay, and I am not going to apologize for how much that means to me at 23 hours.
23 hours and 20 minutes, and I want to do something I have not done in this broadcast, which is to speak about the thing itself rather than about the numbers attached to it. This virus mutated. That is what happened. There was no laboratory, and there was no release, and there was no plan, and there was no enemy. A rabies virus of a lineage that has circulated in bat populations on this continent for longer than there have been people on this continent acquired a change in a surface protein that permitted it to persist in aerosol and to bind in the upper respiratory tract. That change conferred on a virus that had killed perhaps 1 or 2 Americans a year the ability to move through a room. It happened the way it always happens, which is that a very large number of copies were made and one of them was different. There is nobody to be angry at. I know that is unsatisfying. I have found it unsatisfying all night, but I would rather leave you with an accurate universe than a comfortable one.
And I want to say the other half of that because I do not think an accurate universe is only the frightening half. Yes, nobody chose this and there is nobody to be angry at. And also, in 23 hours, on a planet with nobody in charge of it, a manufacturer in India gave away 9 million doses and a colonel took 6,000 volunteer truck drivers with no legal authority to do it, and a bus driver in Boise made 31 trips, and a hospice nurse in Charleston sat with 6 strangers while they died, and a 14-year-old in Providence made macaroni. Nobody organized that. There was no plan for that either. If a virus can assemble itself out of 1 billion random copies, then so can this. That is not a comfort I am inventing. That is in the numbers David has been reading all night.
23 hours and 40 minutes. Let me give you the final picture of this first day as completely as I can, and then say what is known about what comes next. At the 24-hour mark, the United States will record approximately 3,800 confirmed cases and approximately 1,240 deaths. Presumptive infections, approximately 39,500. A figure which is now essentially flat because the pool of people infected before the closures is nearly fully counted. Healthcare workers infected, 547. Hospitals refusing patients, 218 and falling. Power outages, 1,900,000 and falling. Water systems degraded, 15 and falling. Internationally, approximately 1,100 confirmed cases across 46 countries, with 14 countries having implemented preemptive indoor closure and reporting, collectively, 31 cases.
And here is what those numbers mean for the person in a house who has been listening to us since the middle of yesterday. The wave that is going to hit over the next 4 days was created before dawn yesterday. Those people are already infected, and a great many of them are going to die, and there is nothing anyone can do about it now except make sure that not one of them dies alone. That is the tragedy, and it is fixed, and it is coming. What is not fixed is the wave after that, and the wave after that has been made smaller by a factor that the modelers put somewhere near 40 by nothing more sophisticated than a couple 100 million people going home and staying there.
What ultimately happens, based on everything 4 independent modeling groups, the World Health Organization and the Centers for Disease Control now converge on, is this. The outbreak will peak in the United States between day 4 and day 6. Deaths will continue for approximately 3 weeks after the last transmission because of the incubation and clinical course. Total American mortality is projected at between 19,000 and 47,000, with a central estimate near 26,000. Global mortality, with the head start that this country's data and this country's mistakes provided, is projected between 60,000 and 140,000. Mass vaccination begins in 21 days and reaches sufficient coverage in 90. This strain does not become endemic. The consensus judgment is that it burns out because the same mutation that let it fly made it fragile, and because we stopped meeting indoors long enough for it to run out of rooms.
It runs out of rooms. That is the ending. Not a cure and not a hero and not a moment where somebody figures it out in a laboratory at the last second. It runs out of rooms because 180 million people, independently, without coordinating, decided to sit in a yard instead. And in 3 weeks, the schools reopen, and in a month, the theater in Wichita sells 140 tickets, and in a year, there is a vaccine on the schedule that nobody thinks about. That is what the world looks like at the end of this. Almost exactly like it looked before, with 26,000 chairs empty at 26,000 tables, and 100 million people who will never know how close it came.
24 hours. That is the end of the first day. I have been doing this work for a long time, and I have never worked a shift like this one, and I do not expect to again. I want to close my part of it with a number that is not a casualty figure. 6,100 people applied to drive a truck through this. 400 were asked for. That ratio, 15-1, volunteers to requests, is the number I am going to keep. Everything I know professionally told me the ratio would be less than 1. I was wrong in the most important direction a person can be wrong. If you take one thing from 24 hours of this broadcast, take that the models of the virus were roughly right and the models of the people were badly, wonderfully wrong.
We are going to hand off now to the daytime team, and they will carry the numbers forward, and the numbers will get worse before they get better, and you already know that. So I am not going to end on a number. I am going to end where we started, which is with the person listening. If you are hearing this, you made it through the first day. Maybe you made it through alone in an apartment with the windows open. Maybe you made it in a car in a hospital parking lot waiting for somebody's shift to end. Maybe you are 14 and you have a 6-year-old asleep on the couch and you have not slept at all.
Whatever happens over the next 3 weeks is already mostly decided, and it was decided by what people did while they were frightened and did not know if it mattered. It mattered. Every hour somebody stayed out of a room was an hour the manufacturers got, and a dose that arrives on time, and a stranger who lives. I said early in this broadcast that I would give you verified information and nothing else, and I have tried. This is the last verified thing I have. The curve bent 4 intervals in a row, and it bent because of ordinary people, and that is not sentiment, it is arithmetic.
So put it down now, turn the volume low and leave it low, open a window if the air outside is warm because it is safer out there and it always was. If somebody is in the house with you, go look at them for a second before you lie down, and do not wake them, just look. And if nobody is in the house with you, then know that at this hour there are millions of people doing exactly what you are doing, in the dark, with a window open, having gotten through the same day. You were not alone in it. You are not alone in it now.
The sun is up over most of this country. The lights are coming back on 100,000 at a time. There is a line crew somewhere still working, and a driver somewhere still driving, and a nurse somewhere sitting with somebody who does not have long. They will keep at it while you sleep, and there will be another shift after them, and another one after that. That is how this gets carried. Not all at once, and not by anyone in particular. Just handed forward, hour after hour, until it is over.
For David Hale, and for everyone who stayed up with us through the longest night any of us have worked, I am Sarah Donovan. Go to sleep. It held. Good morning.